Welcome to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. This is Jay. It's good to be with you again this Friday morning. Looking forward to this. I'm wearing the basketball cap from the one team that has no connections with the Zionist entity because it doesn't exist anymore. It's good to be with you all. Take a moment, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, although you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't subscribe to the channel. And go through the show description, make sure you're connected into all the work that the East is a Podcast does. Just remind folks that the East is a Podcast also has a YouTube channel. And so you can also watch some of their conversations on video there, which is not, I mean, they had a video channel before I did, but most of their content is obviously been in the podcast audio realm. And so I want to make sure people are signed up for that as well as their podcast feed, and support their Patreon, support our Patreon. And also, I should say, I'm going to add it to the show description, but I've added a Buy Me a Coffee account. And Sina and I will probably talk a little bit about why that is too, as we address some of the things that are going on within the podcast sphere that we think aren't really being talked about and probably need to be. So anyways, my guest, everybody I'm sure knows Sina Rahmani from The East is a Podcast. If you don't, then you're in for a real treat. And you know, we'll cover a lot of things. I mean, it's funny, every time I feel like Sina and I do something, we end up covering a lot of the same ground, but there are always topics that we need to revisit. And so we'll talk again about, is this really the time that we're going to see the US go to war with Iran, which is kind of a recurring theme of our conversations, along with just some general discussion about anti-imperialist podcasting, and also, as we laid out in the title and the description, some of the threats that we see to it, some of the reasons why we're not so sure how long this thing's going to be around. So, Sina, welcome. It's good to be with you again, my friend. You're muted.
Oh my God, it's amateur hour at the Apollo all over again. Hi everyone, it's good to see everyone. I'm Sina. I host the East is a Podcast. I produce a few other shows. You may know them. I'm excited for this conversation. I was here just running around last minute trying to plug in my webcam. I got it working. I set up my gourmet DSLR webcam just for you, Jay. So I'm looking into the camera. I have perfect sound. I know over the years I've disappointed many in my production. So this is the year 2025 is the year we are back. We are back to excellence. And I'm excited to talk to you. These are fun. These are good. These are strange kind of like milestone episodes for us usually, because we are colleagues, and I feel goofy saying that, but it's true, because it's like, what is the league that we're in? Like, what is this league? Where are we going? Because this is a realm of like this realm is this in this abstract realm of cultural things and forms, and it's also there's no physical format for it, right? It's all in this digital realm. So there are a lot of stuff we should talk about, and I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. And we should say some of the other podcasts that you work on too, because I mean, sometimes you reference that, but I don't think folks have a good sense of how much work you do behind the scenes in the tankosphere, as you might call it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I produce the East is a Podcast, obviously my show. I started that going on 7 years ago. I also help produce the Red Nation podcast. This is the 6th year that's going to be on. I recently launched we're under Red Nation podcast. Also, we have multiple shows. We have a show called Red Power Hour. That's under the same feed, but it used to be a separate show, and it is kind of a separate show. And it's on the same Red Nation podcast feed. And we also have another show called Cuscaya, which is a trilingual show in Spanish, English, and Quechua. That's available too. What other shows do I produce? I produce another show called Reboot Health. He's kind of inactive right now. A friend of mine, Amol Deshpande. Not a tank. That's outside of the Tankie sphere of ES. That's in the normie verse. I'm sorry. I'm old, but understand if I called him a normie. It's okay. He's a smart normie. He's never going to listen to this. I doubt he's listening to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. But yeah, I do have, in addition to my work kind of in front of the camera or in front of the mic, I do a lot of my work is behind the camera and sort of editing this stuff. And that was never really my plan in any of this. And maybe we can sort of talk about that. I mean, Jay, I ask you. Let me start with you. Like, it's we've traveled a kind of similar path. Um, Overall, what do you think? What do you think is the current state? Like, what is your sort of assessment of where we are now? Because there's a lot happening.
I think it's easy in general to feel like what we do is quite marginal to the politics and, you know, even movements of the places that we're in, being in the West, in the US, Canada. Um, and I think that we are like, I don't think that's I don't think that's wrong to think that. But I do think that, I'm sure you get this and I get this a lot where you sometimes meet folks in real life or just, folks that online or through social media or whatever that will tell you how important certain conversations that you have are to them and meaningful to them. I'm sure with the Tankie therapy episodes that I know you and many others have been a part of that, but I know that that's been a big, it's been a big forum for people, and it's been a big show, and it's great. And I think that that's one, for instance, that it's like you're speaking to those of us who are just kind of like, I can't really believe what's going on, and I don't really know how to move through this world in which all of the normies are just fine with everything that's going on, and I'm losing my mind, and so I think there's definitely a psychological I think benefit to the work that we do to people who see things in the way that we do. But I also think that certain episodes especially help people with political clarity, help people kind of sharpen their analysis on certain areas where I mean, your work in particular for a long time has been really important, I think, because you deal with a whole region of the world that is um constantly propagandized, and so, like, even people just don't know the history, they don't know about the people, they don't know about the states, they just don't, it's kind of an undifferentiated. I mean, we've had our discussions about Orientalism before, but I think that's hugely important. And yeah, so there's all of that. I mean, we've been doing this now, Josh and I, since fall of 2017, so almost 8 years now. Um, and yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about it other than that, other than, I think in a time when the right is like surging, and feeling itself, and liberals are just more ridiculous than I feel like they've ever been. It can feel very marginal, I think. And sometimes, like, there are other moments where maybe it feels less marginal, right? Because, like, during the height of, say, the George Floyd rebellions in 2020 or whatever, like, the work that we were doing, I think, like, spoke to that moment in a way that people who were maybe outside of our political world were interested in some of the conversations we were having and so on, right? And
Yeah,
but then, you shift to Palestine, or and unfortunately, I think sometimes it's less and less that way,
yeah,
where or there's just not there's not that ability to penetrate the liberal mind with the content that we do. And so then you start to realize, like, gosh, the people who are outside of that are kind of small in some ways, maybe larger than we think, but I think specifically for us, right? Because we're interested in things like Marxism, things like anti-imperialism. There's a certain set of politics that both of our shows, I think, are interested in and speak to in different ways, that it may not always cross over into other audiences that may be against, for instance, what the US is doing, US and Israel are doing in Gaza, but are not, willing to connect with the axis of resistance or whatever else it is, and so, yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I'd have to put some more thought into it, but just off the top of my head, those are some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everything you said and about the show, and I do it is I do get a lot of moments where people come up to me like randomly on this, like it's happened in Toronto, and I don't even live in Toronto full time. Really, I don't really live here. I kind of come back and forth a little bit from where I actually live, so I don't actually have a ton of community connections. But then especially at protests, people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, hey, you're Sina Rahmani, this podcast, Tankie therapy," and you realize that like, oh, this community that we just kind of haphazardly ad hoc built together from a group chat of my friends, of like people that like I wanted to hear from, is that, oh, it's become a lifeline of sorts for people out there who need a certain kind of information that is barred from them. I mean, that's the reality, is that people, this sphere that we operate in, let's call it the tankoverse, we and you and I are like some of the oldest members of this. I mean, our shows are probably some of the oldest flagship shows, if you want to put it that way. It's a corny Star Trek way
Yeah,
of putting it, but the
it's like
reality is,
us and Rev Left, I think, is really the
yes,
only one that was like around when I started. Like I think they started a couple months before we did, but
there
yeah.
I mean, like the thing is that where there's no our realm is also small, but it's also big in terms of like a geographic range. And so I'm sure there are other tanky media projects that are kind of been running in different ways. But in terms of like the podcast environment in the Anglophone sphere, yeah, like there's not if you last more than a year, then you're already ancient, or even 2 years, because most podcasts statistically die after the first few episodes. So people start podcasts, and this happened a lot in 2020 when people were just at home. And the people started podcasts, and a lot of them just died off because
Yeah.
you there's a certain sort of there's a bunch of sort of needs to a podcast, at least in terms of if you wanted to make it as a kind of career, if you wanted to kind of, let's say, monetize it, is that you have to have a certain set of ingredients. And I think the biggest ingredient is a community of guests, because just carrying a show on your own is almost impossible, right? Like you have to be an established person to do that. Otherwise, you're just, and there are shows like that. There are the people who are doing the kind of editorial thing of talking to the camera, and they build communities, and sure, okay. But I think ultimately the what longevity in podcasting and like in our sphere of media specifically comes from a a rich community of people who are willing to freely give you their time and energy to talk about stuff, because that stuff is ignored. And what we offer to people is a platform, right, to engage in important issues that our vast and in the numbering of the tens of thousands, maybe in the 50 tens of 50 hundreds of thousands in terms of actual manpower, that the media class in our anglophone world is so incredibly engaged in the sort of neoliberal, sociopathic, numb to the world politics, unless it's like rogue related to rogue nations, which we should get into, because that's kind of the story of Gaza, I feel, is that like, and the sort of the missing figures of our media class, who have either kept silent or have sort of made muted responses to like literally the worst thing we've seen in our lifetime, the most violent bombardment campaign, the most violent siege, the most violent ethnic cleansing campaign. Like Israelis, this is what they'll be remembered for. They're doing it live, recording it for us, documenting for us, and our media class is actively conspiring to hide it. Okay, so they are part of the war against Palestinians and the good people of the earth who support them. And so, what's happened in effect is that we've had to set up our own, in effect, a guerrilla media network that is connected only through vibes and friendship. Really, if you think about it, is that we have no formal connections. We're just like buddies and allies, and that we bounce ideas off each other informally and we chat. But really, it's just that connection that and our individual work working together informally. right? In a network of people talking about this stuff. And so, I would consider, say, like the Chapo guys, essentially part of this too. Something like from that scale of even the old DSA vanguard that kind of made their name in the mid 2000s, mid 2010s when podcasting was taking off. I would even say that that's sort of like part of that economy too, is that there is this small network of people who are mostly publishing themselves on the legacy platforms and in RSS feeds, aka podcasts. Talking about Gaza, discussing Gaza, talking about this fascist Zionist sort of alliance, this kind of reactionary moment. And so that's what we are. There's the moment we're in, is that this, it's the, sorry to speak in memes, but it's like the Magicians Alliance. That's like basically what we've become in like Arrested Development. Like we demand to be taken seriously. And like, that's us. Like we're just like this like, Cape and Gal, like, kind of crew of people working informally. And so this is a tricky situation to be in when you face down people who own the media spheres that we operate in, right? So like Zuckerberg is waging war on our class of people. You know, Google is definitely part of the Zionist media war machine, right? These are integrated systems pulling all on the same rope. And then there's us, like recording from our basements, from our living rooms, talking to other people, speaking in their private homes. All we have is like words to fight this back, because even then they also find a way to shut you down or demonetize you. Right, like we all like, and so this is the strange, dangerous moment. We are in a moment of severe counter revolutionary reaction, right? Like this is reactionary moment we're in, where fascists feel cornered. I don't know about cornered, but they definitely feel like something is slipping away from them, that a certain mode of global economic and imperial dominance is slipping from the main fascist power in the book, which is the great Satan, America, KKK with 3 Ks, like it well. This is and that and its assets are being employed to fight that decline, right? Like we're in the Dylan Thomas poem, and like they are raging against the dying of their imperial light, and it's very dark times. And one of the front lines of that battle is Gaza, and there's a reason why they are hiding all the crimes that the Zionists commit, right? Because it's not in their interest to show those crimes, right? Because these are ultimately Western crimes because when you enable a crime, you are a criminal as well. And so like this machinery that's now in place, that could very well be used very effectively in Gaza. Like we have a lot of very capable journalists working at the top tiers, but they choose not to look, right? And so that itself is part of the insanity of our moment. Like here is the biggest news story of our entire lives, even in the crass economics of media attention and eyeballs and like that world. It's against their interest to pass this up, right? It's against their interest to pass this up, but it's in their imperial interest to not show, the pictures of Palestinian civilians getting run over by tanks, right? Like dozens at a time, right? Like it's not in their interest to show that, right? Because politically, right? And so this is also part of where we're at, is that we are actively being waged war on by our media class, by the academic media class. And sure, there are notable exceptions within academia, and that's why they sick fascists upon them too. Case in point, my alma mater, UCLA. And so like this is a strange, dangerous moment. And I know I'm also conscious of the fact that we live in two different countries with different kind of state apparatus working on us, and the fact that the U.S. is at this is really becoming the vanguard of the fascist reaction. like almost to the degree that Zionists are. But Zionists, it's like a special case because we're talking about an insurgent counterinsurgency in their heads that they are fighting against, right? Which is like, oh, it's bad to humanize Palestinians. Like, oh, this is their own crisis to see Palestinians getting humanized by the people around the world who are choosing not to go along with this in our media spheres, which is why they're working overtime, which is why they send their psychotic brown shirts like Bitar to like make examples, which is why they like they dox the students. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I said this before, like if the kind of violence that happened at UCLA, at the encampment, which like a bunch of like, teenagers and 20-year-olds got together and camped on a lawn and like sang songs and played the guitar and did things. And yeah, occupied buildings, which is the time shared tradition of American studentry, is that they got together and sent in fascist like brown shirts to nearly murder them. Okay, like if that happened in Iran, there would be conferences at UCLA about that, right? And so like this is the strange like paradox and absurdity whereby the lives of like Americans don't even matter, right? That like the same racist logic that like, oh, an American goes abroad, an American passport holder goes abroad, gets killed by so and so government, friendly government, oh, it's a big crisis, oh, it's like, no, they did that on the UCLA steps. Man, they like went after them and nobody cared. Yeah, some like local LA reporters covered it for like a week, and then the whole national media went on. No one has. I think one person got arrested. If not for this civil lawsuit that they've now put together, it would have been memory hold, right? And so this is a strange. I mean, we need to think about this. We need to consider what moment we've in, because that was a message, right? And all these attacks on Columbia students, like that was a message from our ruling class. This is, oh, you want to make some noise about this? You want to make some noise about our cherished project doing its dirty deed? No, we're gonna give you we're gonna give you more than a hard time. We're gonna terrorize you. And this is the first phase of the reaction. I mean, it's scary, guys, but it's gonna get worse. It's absolutely gonna get worse than this, because even if Trump, let's say Trump croaks it tomorrow in the White House, he's like he's he dies like Elvis on the toilet, which is like how he's gonna go unless he's marked. Uh, like let's say he dies on the toilet tomorrow. You think the next guy who comes along isn't going to use that model that he used, that his that strategy that he used of like just turning the wind tweet, like turning a dial that says racism and looking back? Like that's the whole thing, right? Like why wouldn't the chuds in the future use the same strategy? So I think there is, and I think this is partly like a liberal fantasy, is that, oh, if we just get through this guy, Trump is like a special exception. We'll get back to normal, we'll just get back to normal. But no, this is normal now.
I mean,
This,
most of, like so much of what has happened under the Biden
yeah,
administration,
exactly.
which is like how we got Trump. Like, I think people need to be
Yeah,
really clear about this, is that if Biden had given the smallest little like breadcrumbs to people who cared about Palestine and Gaza, like I think he wins that election easily. Like I think a lot of people just stayed home because they were like,
yeah,
these are two fascist monsters. Like, how do I ethically make this choice? Like, I can't do it,
yeah.
um yeah, I mean, so first of all, I do want to address something. So Hi Mirza. Somebody else said this on the IG, and I just want to clarify. Neither of us is going anywhere, so neither of us is making any kind of conscious decision to stop or to retire our podcasts or anything like that. And there are a set of threats with which Sina alluded to, and I have some notes on some of them that I'll kind of lay out too, that are associated to what we've just laid out in terms of you know why media projects like ours and many others are already under attack or are going to be under more attack soon. And I think it's just important for us to start. Not a lot of people are having these discussions, and I think it's important for us to have these discussions kind of sober minded, try not to be alarmist about things, but also look at the writing on the wall in terms of what is happening within the sphere that we operate in, and kind of what are the mechanics of it right
Mhm.
now. The other thing I wanted to say quickly is a couple people I didn't shout out that I should have within my own podcast's lineage. one is Jared Ball with I Mix What I Like, and obviously, that platform has primarily always been video, which is why I didn't think about it in terms of the audio, but it was a big, I mean, my first interview was actually on I Mix What I Like in terms of this whole sphere, and so I always appreciate the work that he has done and folks at Black Liberation Media and so on. And then the other would just be, I started actually as a producer editor for Beyond Prisons with Brian Sonnenstein and Kim Wilson, and so shout out to them too for kind of also, I think just giving I think those 2 things helped me say, like, "You know what? I can do this." I have people I wanna have conversations with. There are conversations I think need to be had, and it for me, with millennials, honestly, and I don't this is not a dig at Chapo because I've never really listened to them, but my feeling at the time that I came in was that a lot of what did exist at that time in this sphere was kind of Western Marxist slash social democratic podcasting. And so there weren't very many people who were like serious about anti-imperialism and also like histories of like black Marxism, Leninism, and things like that within the United States, like, the histories of actual communist or socialist formations that were anti-imperialist, that has existed throughout US history. So that for Josh and I, that was kind of the impulses. We're like, it was also in that moment because it was in 2017 where everything socialist was being branded as a Bernie bro. People probably remember this, right? And there was a critique of Bernie bros around their kind of racism and lack of anti-imperialism, which is not wrong totally, right? But like it also, I think, over determined a critique of that you're muted. Um I think it over determined a critique too of like people who were voting for Bernie that were also like, this is a horrible system. Like, this is something that feels a little bit like an alternative to us.
I was saying as if liberals care about that, as if being like racism is like not a problem for liberals. Liberals love racism. Their entire like world order is built on racism. Incident, yeah, it's a strange the trajectory of the last sort of 15 years. I mean, at the beginning of at the outset of all this is that like you're a bit older than me, but we're basically the same generation in terms of like we are the children of neoliberalism, right? Like neoliberalism is this reigning ideology. It's been around, let's say 40 years, more or less, 45, half a century going on. And it's some of the most violent, it's a violent phase of capitalist exploitation of a certain, and it has a certain tenor to it. And it requires this kind of, let's say, discursive overlay of concern, right? That, oh, we are concerned about something, we have concerns, we want to fix something, health, whatever. And meanwhile, it's like some of the most like violent social policies enacted happen under this umbrella called neoliberalism. And one of the consequences, I would say, is, and this is like a consequence of like a bigger thing than neoliberalism, because it also has to do with communism, the anti-communism of our that our parents were raised with, um, which is to say that we have been depoliticized generation after generation, and that people have been, I want to say, numbed to the actual violence of like the imperial violence. I mean, first of all, they're not shown it, right? That they're lied to, that people here on our side of the world are basically babied about the truth of our world, that the actual crimes committed around the world by various governments, hostile or friendly to our own, are not covered. And most of them are friendly to our own, that they don't show the executions in Saudi Arabia, right? Like they don't show like the actual beheadings, right? Like with a sword, like they crucify people in Saudi Arabia still. Like this is like, and it has no problem like operating a kind of vast media and cultural sphere apparatus, WWF, all this stuff. And so like this is not part of anyone's serious sort of, let's say, intellectual awakening will require a simple act, right? And I know this sounds like utterly platonic and liberal, but it means opening your eyes, right? Like opening your eyes. Go look at the pictures of Yemeni kids from 2015 to 2021. Go look at the pictures of the starving babies. Go look at the pictures of the destruction of Raqqa, right, in Syria, right? Where they had this, where they were defending against ISIS. Go look at the videos of the Camp Speicher massacre, right, in Iraq, right? Like these are this violent wave, this bloodbath. The scene in The Shining with the elevator and like the blood coming down the elevator, like that's been unfolding for a very long time. And the job of our media class primarily, and to some degree our academic class, is to make excuses and a kind of pantomime as to why this isn't shown, or you show parts of it, highly select parts of it, and you focus on that, and your job is to make hysterical pleas on behalf of X population, Y population, right? Like that's it, right? Like we are the children of Coney 2012, right? Like one of the greatest, strangest, weirdest psyops of all time, right? That like that we are like, if you think that like MK Ultra, right? And like this, I'm typically not a tinfoil hat guy. I mean, what, who am I fooling? Yes, I am. I basically wear tinfoil hat all day long, but there's a reason for that. But in the sense that like, if you think that sort of the ultimate goal of MK Ultra, which was like this kind of mind control op, vast, penetrating all kinds of layers of whatever, like that, if you think it ended with the internet, like you are sorely mistaken. Like it evolved to the point where now we're all MK Ultra by our screens, right? That they've never had this much efficiency, like in terms of being able to dump information into our minds directly. This TV box, right, which is an evolution of the radio box, right? And we should talk about that in terms of the move from podcasting to streaming, because there is itself an evolution in that, and like there's consequences to that, and new media that comes out of that, intertextualities, whatever you want to call it. But getting back to the main point of all this is that like this internet thing was created by the CIA and the Defense Department to help spread American power. It wasn't done to hurt American power. It was done to bring American power into a new realm and to create a new realm, a purely online realm that we all reside in now, right? That like, this is it. And we make our careers in fact, I mean, a lot of us at least, that we live in this information sphere that has been refracted from the print sphere, which reigned for what, 3 freaking centuries? I don't know why I didn't swear there. I always say fuck. I said frick for a second. What's happening? What's happening to me? I've lost my mojo. But like this is something that has been evolving for a very long time, and we are the tail end of a long process. And we were also the first, and literally you and I, and maybe like people a little bit, maybe 10 years older than us, were the first subjects. We were the guinea pigs tested on this, beginning with all kinds of media tools that were then inundated upon us, and then eventually grew in intensity to the point where you fall asleep sucking up information into your mind on your phone, and then the first thing you do when you wake up is you suck up more information, right? Like we are information addicts, right? At a certain point, like we need this information for whatever thing we have inside of us to like stay in the know, right? Which is like an abstract concept, which isn't even real, right? Because no single human being has the ability to know everything, right? It's not a panopticon. You can't follow all kinds of conflicts around the world. I mean, some people do. Justin Potter, actually, I'll say this. If you don't know Justin Potter, you should watch this. He is this kind of omnivorous dude who can piece together all these different realms. It's amazing the way he does it. At least it's hard for me to not specialize, and I tend to do that. And I think most people are like that. They specialize, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because human beings have interests. They're all unique, and they all gravitate towards different things. And no person can really be a global subject, right? And as much as we'd like to think it, we can't. And so for me, like a country like Bolivia, South America in general, is like a big question mark, because I don't spend my time looking at everything that occurs there, or what I see is, right? And so this is something that this is something that our media networks have to account for, is that we have to piece together expertises, that's not a word, expertise, to help at least for our listeners and for the community of people who join us, who look to us to bring them important information, right? Because they're addicts too. You guys are probably bigger addicts of information than we are. Um, is that this is that then it requires us to go back to what I was saying earlier, is that, oh, you need a community of people, right? Like my skill in life, and I've said this before, in podcasting, my success has been my social abilities to talk to people and to make friends and to like go and to just DM people, be like, hey, what's going on, right? And I can do until the end of time. It doesn't cost me any money to be social and to like meet people. Now, and I guess this is something that I want to kick back to you, is that the pillars upon which we all built our media platforms, those are going. Some are gone, right? So the example I'll say is that, okay, YouTube's still around. Of course, YouTube's bigger than ever. Instagram is still around. Okay, the social media companies are still around. They're still old. The legacies, but as we all know, all of us in the Tankoverse, anyone talking about Palestine especially, we're all shadow banned to all shit. Our feeds are suppressed. I never see any of your tweets unless you tag them. I never see anybody's tweets. We are all suppressed as shit. Elon concluded a process that was already existing under Jack, the previous owner, which was you find the voices you don't like and you suppress them, right? Like it's the oldest game in the Western book. If you can't convince them to be your pathetic comprador fool and eat the slop you feed them, then you kill them. And if you can't kill them, you shut them up in one way or another, right? And so this is just a fact, right? Like this is also not new, right? Like new.
All right, we'll get Cena back in a second. Um, all right. So, continuing on this point until he gets back to finish his question, I'll start with this. Well, we'll be talking about this quite a bit. I mean, this is the point you raise here is true. Um, and I think it's also a little bit misleading. Um, all right, hang on. We'll come back to that. Casina's. Oh, he was there.
All
There
right.
he is.
Hey, we're back.
Hey.
Sorry, I think I'm learning how to use my DSL camera as a webcam. You'd think I would have done this before. After 6 years, I still haven't figured this stuff out. So yeah, I heard what you were saying, is that you think it's true, also not true.
Oh, that was somebody's comment. But continue with
Oh,
what you were saying. Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I think that like this is the crisis mode we fix in, because now you could say that, okay, whatever, Twitter was whatever at a certain point, because what happens in shows, at least this has been my experience, is that you launch a show or a media project, whatever. I'm just saying media. I'm just saying show, but you launch a project, you use your initial sort of first person connections and through their friends and their networks to help sort of plant it, and then you grow it by basically chasing clout, right? And that's a crass way of putting it, but in the sense of you find other people who have platforms themselves, who have people around them, who have a community of fans, let's say, and you bring them to your show and you talk to them. And if they're willing to do that, if they're willing to give you an hour of your time, like that's great. And so maybe part of that fan base of that guest comes over to you and you grow. Right now, in a show like mine, that worked for a long time, right? Like early on, let's say I remember an early episode I did with Assad Abu Khalil, the angry Arab. He had a big Twitter platform. He's had a long time internet presence. And I was able to sort of introduce myself to the people that he brought with him, right? And I continued that process for a long time. And this has also been the truth for the other shows. And now, in the midst of all this, is that the key place is that your guest's platform, whatever that is. So let's say your guest has a big Twitter account, and I refuse to call it X. I will never call it X. Or your guest has a big Instagram account, or better yet, if your guest has a big a YouTube account, right? So then you bring some of those people to your feed, right? And as simple as that. Now, what it typically happens, I've found, is that you plateau at a certain point. There's a moment where you plateau, and you'll find that any climbing over that number is nearly impossible. Like it's getting out. Now there can be sharp like periodic rises that happened to me obviously after October 7th. All of a sudden, hey, I'm interested in the Middle East. What's the Middle East show that everybody knows? Okay, that's where having being around for a long time helps, right? And that's part of the success of Tankie therapy, which incidentally I started before October 7th, one episode before. We were just goofing around because it was a group chat, really, and it was just my thing of I wanted to have a different genre of show on my channel, like that I call the friend porn genre, which is like a bunch of people talking around a table and laughing it up. Whereas primarily what you and I do is the one-on-one talking head interview, right? Which has its own logic, which has its own history and whatever, which has benefits and cons. Incidentally, we should talk about that because I have some thoughts about that form, specifically the talking head, one person, one guest interview. But the plateauing problem is real. The plateauing problem is very real, and you plateau and you have a hard time reaching new people. Now, here's why: is because the social media companies have themselves plateaued long ago, years ago. They plateaued. So like there is a community of people who's interested in your content and they exist on different social media platforms, and it's for you to find that community and advertise your content to them. And it's like fishing. You go and you provide a little worm on a hook, and that's it. And then you get them hooked and you hook them in and reel them in. As simple as that. But if if like you've seen the same tweet by the same, or like you've seen the same account tweet 10 times, like, oh, the East is a podcast, and if you haven't followed, you're not going to do it after year 5, right? And so there's only finite number of people on these actual platforms. This is an important thing to remember. Twitter is mostly hardcore users like us, and bots, a lot more bots now because it's money laundering because of the blue check mark, right? So it's like you can tell that it's all AI, like the boosted replies, all that shit. Twitter is broken. The fun stuff of Twitter is all gone. Where you would go, some public individual, I don't know, people who are younger in the audience who forget the good days of Twitter. There, you would go, some public individual would make some asinine remark, and then you would make fun of them endlessly for days on end, right? And this was the game of Twitter, and Twitter was the best place to do this partly because it was a legacy site, partly because the textual aspect of it was the easiest. Compare that to, say, Instagram, where like an Instagram fight is the stupidest fight of all time. You don't even know who's the person you're arguing to. You can't tell visually. And it's like, you're like, who's arguing with whom? And then you're like, oh, you lose because then you can only tell if someone's responding if they put in the tag. And you're like, who is this rando? It's impossible to fight on Instagram. And I think that's done on purpose. Because it's not meant for that kind of fighting, whereas Twitter really is, and YouTube comments too. And so like this, and we should also talk about the kind of cultivation of discord, because that's also a thing with these websites. But at the end of the day, though, you still have that problem of plateauing, right? Like you can't get new people your content. So either you have to wait on history to help you out, aka October 7th, Alexa flood, who then bring a flood, no pun intended, of viewers to you because of the nature of the moment, and also because you, as me, I'm saying, as a niche content provider, like no one has you rivaled. Like there's very few shows that rival what I can do in terms of the content I've previously done. Right now, anybody can start a podcast, and lots of people do, and some of them are a lot good. Like, I'll watch, let's say, like somebody start an Iran-based podcast, which is what my initial goal was all those years ago. I was going to do a podcast on the 40th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. And then a friend of mine said, like, oh, Iran's too parochial. Just make it about the region, which was very good advice, because that's a separate problem too, is that you have also the same problem of specialization that affects other media spheres, affects our sphere too, right? And so if you're like into, like, say, films and imperialism, or anti-imperialist film studies, which there are a bunch of podcasts that do that, then that's what you do. That's your specialization. So you find your niche, whatever community that is, and you introduce yourself. But because these social companies are kind of dead, and because like people are not excited about social media they were, say, 15 years ago, shit, even 10 years ago, right? That I mean, which is like how Trump won his first election. He's like, he took his Twitter account and took it to the White House. Like, that's it, right? Because he bypassed all that traditional media. And then on top of that, they helped him by panicking so much about him. And so this second time around that we're in, which is purely like, as you put it, which was purely like he won because the other guy lost, right? Because the other guy, or whatever, because of Harris, whatever, nobody liked Harris.
Yeah.
Like, that's how he won, right? And so like this is the state of the U.S. empire, where you have two losers. Like the one who loses less is the winner, right? And like this is the state of the American empire, as Chinese people live in the sky and they build cities in the sky and they link up like the entire Asian continent with trains, high speed trains, and Americans still don't have a train from LA to San Francisco. Like it's like like this is I use this word a lot, and I'm sorry, it's annoying, but it's like revanchism, revanchiste, whatever. It's like you've lost something and you want to make up for it, right? And so this is a dangerous, dangerous moment, and we're stuck in the eye of the storm. And maybe it's not even the eye of the storm. Maybe it's coming. Maybe worse is coming because, yeah, like I think about this sometimes. Let's say like a regional war. Let's say, which it won't be a regional war because it'll be instantly a global war. Like World War III breaks out. Of course, it's going to break out involving Iran, America, and Israel as its main, its main belligerents. And Russia will probably get included in all this. But like, will they just let this Iranian guy have his show? Like, will they just let me keep talking? Like, will they? Like, why would they? In history, like, I mean, we love you. Like, liberals love to wave the Ukrainian flag. So if Ukraine is a model for how to react to the situation, then I would get thrown into jail and possibly murdered, which is what they did to that American guy. They murdered him. What was his name? Maybe the chat knows. American guy. I can't remember. Oh, I think your mic switched. Jay, that would have been good to know. It did. Okay.
We are back. Okay, we are back.
There you go. There you go.
I think this is something that worries me in this moment. Is that I don't want to do. I don't.
Hang on.
Yes.
I think it switched again.
Is this thing? Hold on. No, it did switch. Yes, I switched it back. I switched it to the. Which one was better?
Switch it again.
Really? You want my Bose? Okay. Wow. Get out of here. Sure, you've just been shot. Oh, no. Yeah. I'm going to switch it to... Wow, this is really riveting.
Is that better? Which one is better?
No, that's not better.
Wait, because the mic is behind my thing. But this is because the mic is behind my thing. But this is the Bose. My God, this is the worst content of all time. Guys, let's do it.
No, it's not. This is amazing. What are you talking about?
Okay.
How is this? Is this better?
Yeah.
This has to be better.
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, you know what it is? It's this guy. This guy's dying. Because I can't hear you. Hold on. I don't know, Jay. Oh my
God. Check.
Oh, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I sound okay?
I can. You sound good.
Okay. Phew. So yeah, this is we have to. You were right about not doing. What was the word? Panicking. You used the word.
Yeah.
It's like
I don't remember that. I don't remember the term that I use. Yeah, but yes,
it's important.
Being
yes.
Alarmist.
Alarmism. Yes, you have to be careful of not doing too much alarmism, because we have precedents for this, right? The U.S. has been in moments of extreme geopolitical tension, which then it uses to squeeze domestic enemies, right? I believe that as you all know, right? Like you know the history of the Black Panthers, you know the history of the American Indian movement, right? Like repression is the standard game that the U.S. state and the modern neoliberal state plays against movements that challenge it, right? Like we know that, but this is that the nature of this moment, because what's happened in the U.S. essentially is that you have a deeply unpopular war, but it's a genocide campaign, which is because of the nature of the Zionist lobby and because American politics can be leased by the highest bidder, is that you can just call somebody up, and it is a kind of client state model. is that even the U.S. rules internally like a client state itself is the biggest client state of itself, and so the Zionists have mastered this game insofar, and we know this, and then they also have Epstein as a backup card in case somebody gets out of line. They can't bribe them; they can just use like the Epstein compromat, which is the whole point of Epstein. Is that Zionists have mastered this model of American, right? Like I want to say almost suzerainty, right? Like suzerainty or whatever they call it. Like it's almost as if now, is it in America's interest to have Israel? That suggests that, oh, it's not in America's interest that whatever's happening. It's a question that I've wrestled with a lot. I do think that chaos serves the American empire. And I think that Zionists are the best agents of chaos you could ever create, ever imagine. No one better. They do it loyally. They are happy to do it. They are happy to drop dirty bombs. They are happy to like destroy the port of Beirut. They're happy to kill presidents of countries, right? Like they did in Iran, right? Like somebody killed Raisi, right? It's a fact. It's a fact. Iranians won't admit it. Iranians can't admit it, but somebody killed him, right? Like he just didn't go down in a plane accident, right? Like it was an obvious assassination and it wasn't convenient to admit to it. And so for me, like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of what imperialists can do now. Is that to diminish what's happened in Gaza? Of course not. Absolutely not. The violence that they've had to reach for to quell Gaza, or at least try to, has been quite extraordinary, and we shouldn't minimize it at all. But I think Gaza is a model for what the future could see. I think they did the 7 countries in 5 years model. It just took them 15 years. Right, the famous thing that Wesley Clark said in that interview. It said 7 countries in 5 years, and these wars that we've been watching, they don't show them to you. I mean, I'm going to say this again. Like this is there is a regime of censorship that is probably the most elaborate in the world, that is enacted on us. And it's a regime of passive. It's active censorship, but it's not dressed up as censorship. It's just dressed up as newsworthiness. Right. And so like the most infantile thing can happen in this country or whatever, and it's big news. Right. But when the biggest news in human history occurs, right, like literally the worst thing humans can do to each other, that is the most newsworthy by the logic of our bloodthirsty news apparatus, is that, oh, they don't cover it. Like it's just, a tertiary tier. Right. Yeah. And so this is something that we have to reckon with in our media. Is that we live under the tyranny of this regime, but it doesn't even tell us that it censors. And in fact, it holds up freedom, press freedom, as its virtue, right? And meanwhile, hundreds of Palestinian journalists have been killed. I mean, imagine if they were Ukrainians. I mean, imagine if they were Ukrainians. It's crazy, man. We live in these imperialists are insane.
Yeah. Well, so let's pick up a couple of these threads. So this question, so somebody said without the internet, people would be ever more ignorant. Free Palestine. So one, this is true. Yes. Absolutely. But there are these really important contradictions within that true statement, right? I mean, it is undeniable that those of us who have sought out or that want to look at what's going on in Gaza or Yemen, or that we have way more access to be able to see that. And this is also obviously affecting us psychologically in a way where we're like, why doesn't everybody else care about this? Yeah. It's also true that normies who are on normie Twitter or normie IG could go through their entire days without ever coming across it too, because of the way their algorithms are set up, who they're following, what the content that they're if you just want to go on Instagram and watch funny dog videos, like that's all it will ever send you, right? So that's like one element of it. But then there is the piece that you brought in, which I think is really important. I mean, it's something we've talked to Orasami Burton about a number of times. There's the whole Surveillance Valley, Yasha Levine book, like that the internet is developed as military technology, that it is developed by, CIA, Department of Defense, and it is And it is something that when you read counterinsurgency folks from the 1960s, they're like, damn it, we need to create this thing as fast as we can because we need data and we need to be able to surveil all these people and know everything about them so that anybody who has a subversive thought or is interacting with different people, or that we can monitor their every move and be aware of any potential threats before they even occur, right? And then you think about Gaza, and I mean, I know this sometimes gets overstated and there's debates about it because of who's released the information and there's military censorship in Israel and so on, but I do believe that AI is playing a role in the kind of, there's this mass surveillance that goes on within technology, within the digital space. And my understanding of AI, which is very limited, but is essentially that it's like collating data and then producing, you know, it could produce targets, um, it can produce relationships, it could, you know, and so it kind of is able to analyze the data that it's inputting, right, and put out information that cuts a lot of legwork out of that process. And so like let's so anyways, I what I'm saying is that I think that the technology that produces something like the internet also produces a kind of industrial scale ability to wage violence as well. um and then to move this into like our world, to kind of get this to some of the areas we wanted to get to in this conversation, which you've already like alluded to some of them, is that, so at first AI for podcasters, like, hey, now AI creates transcripts of all your episodes. That's great. Creating transcripts is really hard. Accessibility is a problem for podcasters. Like, it's, you know, and it's a lot of work to create a transcript by yourself. And then, but so then what's the phases of that? Like, originally there are tools where we could use AI to do that themselves, right? And then add them to our shows or tell people, hey, you can go here and get a copy of it, etc. Or people with disabilities can get Otter or something like that themselves, right? And create their own transcripts of anything that they, you know, would want to be able to read because they can't listen, etc. Right? Um, but these things kind of very quickly, you know, take on a different sort of scope. So with YouTube, to use YouTube as an example, AI monitors every episode that goes out through YouTube. It produces a transcript of them, closed captioning, um, and it creates a searchable, you know, word searchable, all of that, of everything that we say. And this is how, within sometimes instantaneously, they can either demonetize, say, oh, you did it, there's a copyright violation here, and we'll come back to copyright violations in a minute too. And you know, so they do a lot of this. YouTube has done a lot of this through monetization initially, of saying like, okay, certain content you just can't monetize, right? Because you're saying something that falls outside of our community guidelines for monetization, which a lot of it is branded under a lens of this is what advertisers want and don't want, which is a reality, but that's not the only reality of this. And then like with Ukraine, right? There's a whole set with the war. There was a whole set of guidelines that came out on YouTube on what you could not do or say with regards to Ukraine, which will probably get this episode demonetized just because we've said the word Ukraine too many times. And then and like monetization for, even for, so I should say this too, for our podcast, it's very marginal. Like I don't actually, there's a good argument not to do it.
You're
And
right.
I'm and
No,
I'm
there is.
and I'm
I haven't
yeah.
for that
And
reason. No,
and
it's well because it's. I mean, I guess sorry to interrupt you, but I think I partly it has. To, I think you're right. Is that partly you get a longer leash on YouTube if you don't monetize. That's what I found. Is that like obviously the copyright stuff and you know this the AI stuff, yeah, like everybody's subject to that. But you do get, for us in our Tankie sphere, we are an incredibly short leash. everywhere we go. And it's longer if you decide to just work for free and to help boost, because what you're doing is giving them, it's not like you're not demonetized. Your video is monetized. It's just monetized for YouTube. And not for you. So and also,
Right.
like, when you do monetize a YouTube channel, then you have to think, then you have a different game, right? Because our advantage, I feel, is, I don't know if this is true about you, but I think it's true, is that our advantage is that we're small, right? We are small shows. We are like we are, and our communities are small, but it's
Cedric
enough.
Cedric, I think it was Elizabeth Robinson, but Cedric and Elizabeth Robinson had a small cable access show in
Yeah,
UC Santa Barbara, and they called it they would say that they were the mosquito on the elephant's behind, was the way they referred to
yeah,
themselves. And I think
that's
that's a good way to, like, a
yeah.
good metaphor to think about what we do.
I think so too. And on top of that, like, it's because this content, is, and because Zionists have done such a good job terrorizing people into not speaking, those of us who haven't been coward, it effectually places a spotlight on us. Right. And so, like, because like, say, like those fascist psychos, Betar, they're going after Nardine Kiswani, who's a hero. She stands up to them, and she looks like a hero. She looks like a freaking giant compared to them. He's a bunch of little, like stupid, ugly little anonymous Zionists chasing with her with a pager, trying to look flexing, probably out of breath after walking for 5 minutes, like pathetic fascist losers, right? But they flex their online power because ultimately these platforms are for them, right? Like, they're run by their allies for their benefit. Right. And so just yesterday, they were like, Yemenis were having too much success defeating the US empire. So what did they do? They suspended the account of the Twitter of the Yemeni spokesman for the military. Wow. Yeah. Oh yeah. Big accomplishment there, Elon. You pathetic Zionist cock. Like, wow, you don't like what they have to say, so you delete them, right? I mean, this is the oldest story of the book. I mean, YouTube did this. I mean, what YouTube did to Russian journalism was a crime. They delete, and not just Russians too, people, anyone related to that. Like, there were tons of amazing documentaries about Syria, like, they just got erased, that people had to save amateurly and put them, had to post them, repost them. And funny enough, because YouTube doesn't care about, like, stolen Russian content, it didn't flag any of these, so you can still find them. Right. But, like, there's tons of content. People worked hard, and they just erased them in overnight. I mean, poor Abby, what's her last name? Abby Martin. Abby Martin got her whole channel nuked, right? Like Chris Hedges, I think, too. All the RT stuff, right? Like, they
Yeah.
just used that as an excuse to nuke it, right? And so, like,
Afro African Stream too, right? I think
yep, yep,
African Stream
yep.
was
They
yep,
nuked
yep.
that too, right? Like, anything, and now, which is funny because RT's now welcome on Twitter because RT's like anti-lib, right? And so, like, that ridiculous game is back on, because I see tons of RT stuff now on specifically Twitter, but that's because RT is like sort of, they like, they basically lick Trump's toes all day long because he owns the libs, right? And interestingly enough, like, owning the libs is the only way, like, us, like, real communists, we that's the only way we can go viral. So, like, I had 2 tweets go viral, and they both went after effectively liberal professors. The one about Eve Tuck, and exposing her hypocrisy, and that went crazy viral. And I realized it's like, yeah, oh yeah, because the algorithm didn't know that I was I was going at it from the other
Right.
direction, left or right.
You went
Yeah.
after decolonial study. So there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
Like, so like the chuds picked it up. They all started like, oh, like, and so, like, this is the game, at least with Twitter, because that's the platform I know the most. I mean, Insta is whatever, but I mean, this, our size helps us, to get back to this original point. Like, our size helps us because, like, we stay off their radars, right? I mean, if Electronic Intifada can stay alive after 25 years almost. I've been reading them since college, at least. So it's been, 20
Yeah. No,
years at least.
it's over 20 years, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if they can stay alive, then you can stay too online, right? Like, you can find ways. I mean, maybe they try
Right.
to nuke you at the beginning. I mean, I think that, as the joke is from this title, it was a kind of a clickbait title. Sorry, folks, we fooled you. We pulled a mean trick. We did 1 unit of fake news, and we suggested that we're quitting this game. Like, I'm not quitting this game. I'm telling you, people, you have to drag me off the internet before I shut up about this stuff. And I'm sure you're the same, Jared. Like, this is not. This is I'm in this for the long haul. I've been here. Now, what worries me though, and this is something I wanted to pick up from earlier, is it too hard to watch? And maybe the chat can tell us, because you people are bucking the trend. Is it too hard to watch two people speaking? Like, this is the basic format of a lot of what you and I do, right? Like the talking head interview. Is it enough these days? I'm beginning to feel no, that I need to do more what I call sort of infotainment, so that when you and I do videos, like I would take this video that I would get from this feed. So, oh, Jared, send me the tracks. You would send me the video, and then certain parts. So, like what you were, the show you were just mentioning. Who was the host? I forget. Like the elephant. Like I would find clips of that show. What was the show called? Incidentally, it was Cedric.
Yeah, so Cedric Robinson and Elizabeth Robinson had a
Yeah.
show. I'll look it up. Yeah.
So
Anyway, yeah,
my point
yeah.
is that like I would find it and I would play it over your clip as you were talking, right? And instead of the entire thing, like
I was called
like
the Third World News
okay.
Review or something like that.
So I mean, generally though, is that you wonder about, because we are so inundated with media, because we are so info addicted, is that just listening is not enough. Just two people talking is not enough. You have to have moving images going across the screen at all times. Now, is this true for audio only people? No. Right, audio only people are their own existence. They're happy. Like I have audio only people who have been listening to my show for the whole time, like from like episode 3 onwards. Right, I love you people. Please never change. But like that's they exist in that realm. That's how they consume their information pill, whatever it's called, and they listen, and there's either, and usually they're moving, they're doing something in motion, they're going somewhere, they're traveling, they're exercising or something. I find it hard to believe of people just sitting down and listening. I'm sure it happens. I used to do it a lot, but I feel like because it's audio, it can exist in, say, the background of our lives, whereas with video, and I know some people do use the YouTube app as audio, but ultimately with video, you're talking about a static viewer. You're talking about somebody sitting down and looking at you and watching a screen and watching you talk. Is this always the case? No, but I find that these are two separate viewers. These are separate audiences, and you don't have to bend over backwards to satisfy both of them over the top, right? Like for the audio people, you could pump in a ton more. Like audio, for instance, audio only is less policed, right? Like way less policed than video only. You could get away with a lot more copyright infringements. Just saying. I'm not saying go do it.
Well,
then you can. Not a lot, especially because Apple is more policing it now. But you can more than with YouTube.
So I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so yeah, quickly on that, I kind of want to table that a little bit and come back to it. But yes, I think that there is some overlap in audio video audiences. Our audio audience is much larger than our video audience, but I think that's just because of how long we've been doing each. That when you do an audio feed, it takes years to build up the subscriber base that you have, and it's the same thing once you move into video, that you have to do it. Now I do think you're right about forms of content in the video realm. There's a lot of people. I mean, my son is a good example. I have a 16-year-old. He could look at 30 to 90-second content all day long, 18 hours straight. He could do it, and but he would never in his life sit down for, well, I shouldn't say that. It would have to be like a Pokemon like playthrough or something like that. Like, but he really doesn't have the same attention span for long form content, right? And same with my younger son. And I think that's being programmed. They've figured out like this is the highest burst of dopamine that we can get to people, is these reels, these TikToks, etc. And so, yeah, short form content, I think, is is the way to connect with younger audiences. I do think that there's an interesting thing for both of our shows, especially the audio realm, which is I also think that for people our age, maybe a little older, maybe a little bit younger, that there is also for many people a recognition that the media that they would engage on the mainstream has been highly truncated, that it is these, it's a 30-minute show, and within that 30-minute show, it's like, you know, 8 3-minute segments and commercials, or 7 3-minute
Yeah.
segments and commercials, right? And so if they really want to learn about something, then they need long form content, and
Yeah.
we provide a alternative to sitting down and reading a book, which is
Right.
hard, I think, in the ADHD society that we've been,
Yeah.
acculturated into to do. And so I think that the audio thing, I think audio, part of what I've heard this from people who got pissed off when we went to video and so on, is like audio is something that a lot of people who commute, that they put it on in their cars and it's easier. You can, I mean, when I'm in my car, I'll have a YouTube show on and I'm not looking at it, but I'm just
Yeah.
listening to it. So there's different ways people can do this,
You have
but
the
I recognize.
subscription to YouTube Red or whatever it's called, because
So
you can't turn off your screen, right? Like that's the trick that
right,
that's their thing.
right, right. That's the thing, is it basically pushes you to pay for premium, which is like $14 a month. I mean, I think the thing about YouTube Premium, Jared Ball actually said this to me, and I think it's true, is it's like if you're gonna pay for one streaming service, it probably should be YouTube Premium, because there's just
Interesting.
better content on YouTube than there's gonna be on, Hulu, Netflix, like it's just, especially if you want anything in our political world,
Yeah.
there's way more stuff that you can find. So anyways, that's that piece of it. And I think we could come back to it a little bit more. Yeah, hating commercials. And I think this is a real thing. And it's also the question around monetization to me, is that the revenue that we get from commercials on YouTube really actually doesn't, at this point for me, cover the cost of the services that it requires to actually stream
Yeah.
onto YouTube. So it costs me more
Yeah.
to do this show on YouTube than I get in exchange of it for revenue. Now, I also probably connect with a new
Yeah.
audience, and some of them become patrons, or
Yes.
switch over, and it's hard to disaggregate who comes from where, but so there's like pros and cons, and I don't know how long, if I keep going at this, right, will the money start to be better? I don't know, but I would say I just did my taxes, and like the first full year of doing this, it probably actually hurt the sort of business of the podcast to do video for the first year. um
Because of the cost of StreamYard, which is not cheap, folks, by the way. StreamYard is
right.
extremely expensive. It's just way too
Yeah,
expensive, actually, for what it
so
offers
yeah
you. Come on, double.
so
It's double the price of its peers.
Yeah, well, and I'm gonna be leaving it partly for what we should talk to, which what I want to pivot to is, so yeah, it's because of StreamYard, because I've had to get a Canva account to do all the thumbnails, like these kinds of things, um, but in addition, so StreamYard's a good example. So StreamYard created a set of new terms and conditions at the end of the Biden administration. Patreon put into place a new set of community guidelines a couple of weeks ago. Both of them are essentially, I'm not going to pull them up. Maybe I'll do that another time and show the people what they say. But both of them are kind of a combination of an expanded anti-terrorism kind of discourse, right? Which includes you cannot speak favorably about armed groups which are not state actors, or state actors from states that we prescribe as sponsors of terrorism, so and so on. So right, so it's like you can't say anything other than neutral or condemnatory things about Hamas, Hezbollah, Ansar Allah, Iran, Cuba, I imagine, and so on, right? So this is new in terms of that. And what are the punishments for this? That part is a little bit unclear.
Yeah. Because it's
It's
also a
not
punishment for themselves. That's
right.
the thing. Like
They'll lose
it's
money. Yep.
against their own interest to do this on behalf of Zios.
Right.
Like it really
Right.
is. Like we bring in considerable revenue to these places, and are they
Yeah.
really gonna lower? Like what's more important? Like kowtowing to Zios sensitivity and like their desire to flex on everyone and have everyone shut up while they do the worst thing possible, or is it the bottom line? Right? Like that's the insane moment we're in. Like will Patreon really hurt its like shareholders to keep pathetic Zios happy from keeping us off the thing? I don't think so. It will take a lot. It will take some sort of state intervention, I
That's
feel.
the thing. That's the
Yeah.
question. The question is because it's interesting, YouTube hasn't really gone there yet. Like their guidelines haven't really been updated specific to Gaza and Palestine, which is interesting because they were updated with regard to Ukraine. I've found this
Yeah.
fascinating a little bit that they
Yeah.
haven't done this yet. I think it's because there's so much content about it and it is bringing in viewers that they have been a little bit hesitant to do it. I mean, I think it's the same kind of thing for Twitter and Instagram less so because Instagram has more gone heavier on censorship. I
Yeah.
think Twitter's move has been more to like shadow ban and so on, but they also I think acknowledge that even with people shadow banned, some of us have notifications on each other's accounts and so on, and we're still like talking about Palestine in these spaces is still one of the primary reasons that a lot of people are actually going to them.
Yeah.
What do they have left? Like you said, it's hollowed out, like it's
Yeah.
bots, a few accounts.
Yeah.
Um, so that's just a contradiction that's there. I do think the state intervention question is really interesting because it's a real question of why would they put these things in? I mean, obviously they're kowtowing to Zionists, right? There's also language from the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. It doesn't explicitly say this, but it's like you're not allowed to belittle victims of genocide, which is laughable, right?
Yeah.
Because like what
That's
we're
all
talking,
they do. Yeah.
right? But it's like this, like it's the language of like you can't do anything to diminish the Holocaust, right? You can't do it, and I assume this is also around they don't want people equating Zionists with Nazis in this moment,
Yeah.
right? A
Yeah.
specific thing. Um, so there's that, and so the question is though, like I know that there are some examples. So I think I forget their name. It's like community liberation programs or something like that. It's a
Yeah.
program in California that their whole Patreon account was wiped out because they wrote something about like Al-Aqsa flood being an act of liberation, right? So there are some examples where people and like and so that part of this is also, I'm saying this because this is part of why I'm starting a buy me a coffee page as opposed to just a Patreon, because I think Patreon is in danger in some ways. I think that
Yeah.
they know that this is a big way that people are funding their streaming and they want to be able to flip the switch on people,
Yep.
and they know that the money is a significant factor. Now, to your point earlier, like I wouldn't stop doing this, obviously, if my Patreon, Josh and my Patreon got nuked. But at the same time, like that would be a huge hit
Yeah.
to my family, to him, all of that. And so it is a concern. And I think you and I have had offline conversations where we've talked about like, how do we diversify what we do and where we get our revenue streams from so that it is not so vulnerable to attack, right? But I think that is what they're setting up for, is to be able to go to both the ways that you get your content to. So StreamYard is an example of a platform that you use to get onto YouTube, to get your content onto
Hmm.
YouTube, and also to stream to other services. Um, but also the money of, to basically be able to sanction podcasts, right? Is
Yeah.
is really what they're thinking about. And I think we're going to see more and more of it, right? So I think it's just something that people need to be aware of, that's obviously on our mind. And we also as content creators have to try to figure out creatively, what do we do also to prepare ourselves for that line of attack.
Yeah, I mean, my strategy so far has been to replicate myself and like replicate like in not literally, but in the sense of I'm trying to create as many shows and create as many sort of fronts that I can create. And like I think of this as like info jihad. Like this is info war. I am an info warrior. And like this struggle that we're in is against like people who control large swaths of the infosphere, and the people, and like even the parts that they don't control, the few little cogs, they have to go after them, they have to strangle them. I don't think it's fully working to their plan. I think it's a little bit working. I think we're going to have to, things will get worse. Things will have to have gotten significantly worse, I think, for Patreon to really start clamping down. I don't remember the story. I know the page, I followed them, were mutuals, but I don't remember exactly how it started. Maybe, I know we started our Patreons a while ago. So like that also, like we've been grandfathered in. And certainly like now it's actually more expensive to start a Patreon. They take more now than they did before, considerably more, a few percentage points. So it's part of that game. But yeah, you're right. Like we need to think about what happens the day after. Like this is not some forgiving entity. This is not I think this sometimes too is like, okay, let's say Zionism's over tomorrow, right? Like, and settlers go back. You think like those insane fascist Zionists and their allies here, like, are just going to stop? They're just going to be like, well, that was fun. Like, okay, you got it, you got us. Like, they're just not going to do anything. Like, they're not going to have retribution. Now, mind you, if it were to come to that, like, I think there would be some sort of cataclysmic war. Like, I don't think that Zionism will just collapse. I think people talk about that. I think that, yeah, like American empire won't just collapse either. It'll die. It'll die a long, slow death. And maybe this is the die. Maybe this is what we're watching is its death, and it's extremely violent, right? Like this point that Max Blumenthal made the other day about that video that Trump circulated of like basically the war crime, killing some Yemeni civilians, on screens. Like all Americans can do now is watch their power kill defenseless civilians, which is where Zios are, right? Because that's the only way they can unite again for an idea of themselves, right? And like that's the dangerous moment. That's the danger of this moment, is that like nothing is pulling together Americans better. Like the various sort of like shattered strands of American imperium right now than the sadistic pleasure that they derive flexing on their enemies, right? And so Yemen is the front line. Israel is obviously doing this in Gaza for them, right? Providing the images like, oh, cope and seethe, right? Like that kind of mentality. So this is, so killing is bringing them together. And this is true for Zionists. This is true for Americans. The post 9/11 war moment that you and I were forged in, politically at least, or growing up in, at least in terms of, it was my adolescence, it was probably your 20s, you're a bit older than me. But like this is that result that like the Americans like united over killing Iraqis, right? Like they united over killing Afghans, right? Like the strength of American power was measured in corpses. And this is not unique to the American imperium. And this is true for a lot of different empires that preceded it, the ones that helped give rise, that like the piecemeal nature of the American empire, which is cobbled together from various European empires, right? Like some horrible Frankenstein's monster. So that like it's one thing that its continuity is sadistic pleasure in watching your enemies die. Right? Because anybody who chooses to stand up to you, you have to crush them. You have to crush them so brutally so that you have to show how strong you are to your own people. Right? If that's not on display in Gaza, I don't know what is. And so our relation to all of this, our relation to this cataclysm, this is the question of our moment, like how we reacted to Al-Aqsa flood. And we know this from, I'm sure you know this, like the so-called abolitionists in our circles, right? Who suddenly went quiet on one of the greatest days of abolition ever, which is October 7th, right? Which was a prison break of like an imperial, like an anti-colonial prison break. right? That all the rhetoric of prison, breaking from prison, oh, you break the chains, all this stuff. Palestinians did it. They put it into practice. It wasn't just words. And a ton of them just went fleeing to obscurity. A ton of them just kept silent, have still kept silent in the midst of all this. I mean, we all know their names and stuff. There's no point reaching out to them, but it showed like this. It was a clarifying moment. October 7th and its aftermath, and the subsequent holocausts that Zionists have been waging. That it was a clarifying moment for our own political community, which is to say, who has the mettle to stand up and say it's not wrong to commit to defend yourself against violence, against imperialism, and standing up and saying that, and it shouldn't be illegal. And if they make it illegal, which they're trying to do, right, that like, which is like effectively like what they're trying to do, is that this is something that this framework will be applied to us like going forward. Right, like whatever happens to us on these channels, it will be used as a kind of as a as a pattern, something to apply to the future, because it's going to keep happening. These crises will build up, right? Like if Gaza's like this, what will Taiwan look like? I mean, I know all things are different, but like American imperium won't just go back, won't just like kick back and say, okay, we're done. That was a good run we had. See you later. Like they will burn the planet, and they are burning the planet as their power escapes them. I mean, it's scary. It's really scary, and we are minor players in a larger historical drama. Like we are little fish, okay, and that's okay to be a little fish. Little fish are revolutionary often. I mean, look at China. It's just more that in the meantime, how do you keep sane? And maybe that's something that our viewers can help us figure out too. Is that I think that the communities that we've built around ourselves have helped us keep sane. I know that's true for me. Is that like just knowing that there's like what I mean? How many people are on this channel? 100 right now. 100 people watching right now. That this is something that like, okay, we're not alone. We're not alone.
Right.
We have a lot of people on our side. It's just they make us feel alone. They make us feel like we are marginal. And there's billions of people out there who agree with us. Like the Tankie world is big. It's very big. It's just not. It's just so heavily policed in English that you can't find. It's hard to find a foothold in a larger sphere. Which is those guys. Someone like Chris Hedges trying to take refuge in like RT and like look what they did. Like they just squashed it. They can just squish anything. They say, oh, you're connected to some evil entity, and they squish you, right? And so going forward, we have to account for. We have to watch what our enemies do. We have to follow them, see their strategies. We have to make sure that their own sort of nefarious ways don't swallow us up. And if they do attack us, then we have to use the communities that we've built up to shore up our defenses, sure, but also to redeploy to other sites, to other places, right? Like it could very well happen that there's like a day where they kick off all of us, like a Black Thursday or something, where they just nuke all of us on YouTube. It could happen. It could very well happen. And then I'm like, shit, I didn't even have a newsletter, right? Like I didn't even have an email. Like, what am I gonna do? But like I've reached a point where I'm confident that like the fans that I've cultivated over these years will come looking for me and will like seek out we'll seek this out, because it's been 67 years of this. Clearly, like I have some solid fan base that I can rely upon, who will support me, who are interested in hearing this stuff, who are interested in the kinds of networks that I have access to. So that's something that they can't take away from us, right? Like it's like the Leonard Cohen, although he's probably a gross Zionist, I think he was. He's like, we're ugly, but we have the music. And that's something that I feel sort of animates me in all of this, that like this is something that they can't just take away from us. The fact that like our message falls upon our message sort of is appealing to a lot of people out there. It's just hard to find them because of the layers of bullshit that get between us.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that this is one of the interesting things I've been thinking about recently, and I talked a little bit about it to Dr. CBS yesterday. I've talked about it in a previous conversation with Orasami Burton, but and CBS disagreed with me to some degree, and that's okay. But I think that her pushback was correct, right? Which so this was I wanted to say this about Mahmoud Khalil, right? The deportation. I don't know if you saw the letter that Rubio wrote yesterday or the memo that he wrote, which it has several things where it refers to his beliefs, his ideas, right, and then the fear of potential further action and etc. Right, and CBS made the good point, which is that they're not deporting him or they're not trying to deport him because of his beliefs. They're doing it because he's acting on those beliefs, right? Which is true, right? If he doesn't go to encampments, if he doesn't make speeches, like then they don't care what's in his head to, if he keeps it to himself, right? So there is like this I do think it's important to make that distinction. They don't What they don't want us to do is act on ideas that they don't like. But they are very interested in policing our minds, and they are very interested in our ideas and what we think, and not allowing certain ones into the space. It's one of the contradictions that I find interesting about my show is that, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, Sina. I mean, we both interview folks often who are not US citizens, right? Who are either permanent residents, are on visas, or are not from the US at all. And so some of those people have been targeted, right? Even in this, like I have multiple guests that we've had on that have, you know, asked me, hey, could you take that down or whatever, because they're coming after me. I'm happy to do that always for people, right? But then there's Momodou Tall, right, who, did an interview with Josh and he stood tall on it and then eventually decided, okay, I'm gonna just self-deport because there's no real process here, right? They're not going to let me have my day in court,
Yeah.
or really, and the alternative is being put in a nice detention facility and all, like, nobody wants that, right? So understandably, in solidarity to him and to all the other folks who are facing these kind of attacks. But like, even like, I'll say this because Lara Shihai has talked about it on this platform, so I think it's fine for me to say it as well. But she's talked about how when she comes in and out of the United States or through US customs at different points, they actually ask her about her podcasts. Like they actually, and so like the state is paying attention to the work that we are doing. So there's a certain level of it where it may be that to some degree that they're leaving us up because they want to be able
Yeah.
to monitor what we're doing, and and
Yeah.
who we're talking to, and who are the people spreading these ideas, right? um so there's that element as well. um but beyond all of that, like, I think that it is just it there's the counter of that, that it does also show the importance that they're concerned with the
Mhm.
spreading of these ideas and concerned with the kind of community that you're talking about that we do have,
Yeah.
um which partly shows up as audiences to these things. But like, for us, we have a Discord, and so that's a space where I connect with folks. We've done a lot of study groups at Millennials, and like that's been an amazing space to connect with a lot of people over the years, as well as meeting people in person. Sometimes when I worked at a bookstore, I would meet people more regularly that watch the show. And so yeah, there is this it's just interesting. It's just an interesting moment this way, because they're monitoring what we're doing. They're setting up rules to be able to take us down and take us out. They're going after guests from our platforms and so on, right? Um, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know beyond that what to say about that, but it's a time to be aware of all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, this is what counter revolution is. This is what like counter revolutionary action is. This is like counterinsurgency. You are watching a state, and in a realm where, like, in a moment where historical moment, that is, where media plays such a huge role in our lives, like literally, it's massive. Media is like, it's the size, like, you see a billboard for a building, you see a billboard on an entire length of a building, right? Like, this everything is this society of the spectacle. Whatever, I hate to, I'm like this, the anarchists are right about the spectacular nature of late capitalism. absolutely, is that it requires spectacle, and it requires constant spectacle, so that like it's not even like genocide is part of the spectacle now. A case in point, the Zionist troops who are play acting as characters in their own in as their own sort of like extermination agents, like recording themselves, proudly cheering themselves on, right? Like media is so important to our lives. It is so critical. It's basically impossible to live your life without media hitting you, unless you live in the middle of nowhere, outside of electricity. You basically have to do full Walden, and to avoid media coming to you, right? Whereas, and this is a really new thing, right? Like this is a new thing. Unless you had a radio, this was not the case 60 years ago, right? As early as, unless you had some sort of like physical rate, and what year is it now? Maybe whatever. Yeah, let's say 70 years ago, right? Unless, and you couldn't, and a lot of people couldn't read, right? So newspapers were out of the questions too. Again, I did it. No. Here, I know what I keep touching my cord. That's what. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
It's because I keep touching my cord. That's why. I have to do this. I have to do that, and then maybe that'll work. Let me do that. Okay, I'm just gonna use this one. Fuck it. Look, the poorer
There you go.
camera. I have to use the poor man's camera. I'm gonna readjust. Can you still see the Colima doc, guys? Did you see the Colima doc? Now we've reached ADD part of the episode. Everyone, look at my dog. I show this to Daisy. I say, Daisy, this is your ancestors. This is your people. She does.
What does she say?
She she has her own way. She talks about how racialization is fake, and she has no connection to this clay dog, but that's just Daisy. I think overall my anxiety is the media sphere that we grew up in, and then on top of that we evolved in, that this is something, this is dying at the moment, that it's evolving or something into something else. And I'm afraid for the kind of content that kids are viewing. I mean, that's what all old people say. Sure, they're like, "Oh my god, it's moral panic around content." Like, but I've like those. What is the thing that they do? The NPC stuff. The chat will know. Is that those like when you do like and like someone gives you like a point or whatever. Like I can't remember what it's called. It's like an NPC thing. That like Zizek famously did it in one segment. I do worry about that as it gets worse for us, like here materially, because that's going to happen, no doubt, as the American empire falls. That it will, that like the urge to take refuge in stupider and stupider media will escalate. That like it will be like our lives will be Bravo reality series all day long, every day, just sucking it up, consuming it, and some sort of VR. I mean, the metaverse didn't work out. I don't fully believe the metaverse was actually for the metaverse, or at least the money they spent on it. They spent like $40 billion on it or something, or even more. And it's like Neom. It doesn't really exist. It's probably some like money laundering scheme. I don't know. I have no proof for that, but I don't see anybody on the metaverse. I don't ever hear anybody going to the metaverse.
I don't know what the metaverse is, so
Yeah, well,
that's how much older than you I am.
Yeah, it's like I don't. Maybe chat would know if anybody in the chat has used it. It is like nobody's. It's like their fake VR environment that nobody uses. That like it's like a ghost town. Like even 4 years ago, it wasn't even being used, and that's like the last I heard about it. It probably just shut down. But a lot of these things, like it's just it's just content, the same way that like when you see like, oh, what's in the content of a hot dog, like that's it's just filler. It's something to get you across your day. And then when the imperialists decide, oh, this thing is important, then they push a button, like a big red button that says panic, and on the entire media spectrum covers it in in perpetuity, right? Until that button turns off, right? So Ukraine was the example. Women Life Freedom was another example, right? Like these were crises moment for the media that they then quickly moved on from, and the depth of it for them is very shallow. And this is the remnants of it. So, it's funny you talk about normies and stuff. Last night I was playing volleyball and I was having a conversation with this guy, 50-year-old guy, and I was like, oh, what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm a graphic designer. He's like, oh, what do you do? I was like, oh, I'm a podcaster. I'm a podcaster. He's like, oh, is there anything I was like, not really. He's like, what's the subject of your story? I was like, oh, and I used Middle East history, which is like, I was like, but that's like the term I use because he's like, oh yeah, it's too complicated for me. I don't know anything about that. And he was just kind of laughing it off. And I realized that oh, people recognize that they don't know, and but they use the excuse of, oh, I'm incapable of understanding, I'm just a small bean normie and my brain is too small. And that's partly a consequence of Zionists making it impossible to talk about it, but also a wider consequence of people feeling disempowered. Oh, God, I'm such a liberal to say that. Feeling like that the world is really big and scary, and they are just like nothing in that, right? That it's ultimately a sign of defeat in how you situate yourself in the world. And I realized I'm looking at the wrong camera. I was looking at the old camera. This camera's here. And for him it was just an issue. It was just an issue of oh yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to pay attention. And you could tell that, okay, he knows vaguely that some kind of genocide is happening and he knows that's bad, but that's where his brain stops. And then we went back to talking about furnaces and his lack of contracts. And so that moment for me, I realized, is oh, this is the majority of my society is like this.
For sure.
This is what everyone's like. This is what most people, and it's like an excuse. And it'll stop being an excuse though when it gets really bad though. When it gets really, really bad over here, I believe that the violence will migrate here, and it already is. And I think that it will. Oh God, did I lose it again? I think that it will come to us. And I think that the chaos will grow, and the economic chaos we're watching right now is the first of it, but it will spread to social and there is social chaos. I mean, people are out of work, people are living in their cars. I mean, they're just not showing it. And it will probably take some, major street unrest, as we like to call it on TV, some kind of real rebellion. And then I would feel then we're going to see the ratcheting up of more pressures. Then you're going to see real thought police. This may be the warm up. I know we've been saying this a lot, but it does feel like a warm up to something. And the trade wars and the tariff wars, and this is not what happens when you're winning. This is not what happens when you're fucking winning.
No, I mean, I think that the overall, there's so many things going on at once that I think it's difficult for people to keep up and to process everything that's happening at the same time, right? So there's definitely the trade war aspect. There's this repression that's going on that related a lot to campaign promises around deportations, right? So it's if they can produce a certain number, I think Mahmoud Khalil is a good example of we can make an example of this person. This is somebody raised the question of, they want people to see that, let me see, everyone who might step up to speak, act, to see that that what they have done to a good person like Mahmoud, and to be afraid to step in his place. Destroying one good person's life has a ripple effect, right? But it's not just one person. I mean, we're seeing across the country where universities are saying oh, here's a list, or in the UC system, I saw Charmaine Chua put out a thing recently about I don't know if it was 200 or how many, but it was a large list of students on visas that have been, marked for immigration to be deported, to have their visas revoked, essentially, right? And so this is going on a big scale, but it's also going on and in tandem, in the Trumpy world, this is all related to we need to get these undocumented and illegal, like it's all the same thing to them. Like they buy into this idea of people who are not white, male, productive members of American society who buy into true Americanism, to again use CBS's phrase, like that these people all they need to go. Like this is, and you see this in Europe too, right? Like there's this whole push, you probably see it in Canada as well, around like, we've allowed this liberal multiculturalism to bring all of these non-American and un-American people into our societies, and so we need to like get rid of them. And so that's one element of it that is sometimes wrapped up in politics. And yeah, they like to make an example out of the people who are, they can use anti-Semitism as this boogeyman. They like to do that, right? And to say we're getting rid of all these anti-Semites, right? I thought CBS made the point last night that anti-Semitism is the new it's the new communism. So she was saying, like, when you think about the apparatus of anti-communism within US history, anti-Semitism has replaced that, right? So that it's like, which is not to say that there isn't still the anti-communism and that they won't still go after that, but they see it as the bigger, this is the more relevant, more important thing right now that they're using. And of course, what they mean by this, right, is anti-Zionist, any sort of pro-Palestinian stance. And they're going, this is the point I wanted to make is, so yeah, actions, they do go after actions, but an action can be as small as a paper that was written. It can be as small as an op-ed. It can be as small as going on a podcast and saying certain things, right? Especially for people who are visa holders or green card holders on right now. And that also, this was one of the things I wanted to kind of talk to you about too. That also does have an impact on us, because it's like, now people are more reluctant also to come on our platforms, right? Which is also going to mean that you and I have to do more of these shows, and that we can, we'll have to talk to each other. Those of us who have a little bit, are further away from the immediacy of the repressive apparatus, like are going to need to kind of keep this stuff going, because some folks are just not going to be able to do it because it's just too risky for them, for their status or what they're trying to do. Pursue their degrees, get their, all those things. So that's a real like kind of cost of what's going on right now. But yeah, the other element, I guess, that's really interesting too is what's going on to universities on a whole and to like research. I mean, people who have grants from things as simple as like the Department of Health to like research like lead poisoning, or like any number of quite mundane things within American society, those grants are just being gobbled back up by the state. So like you did the thing, you said, we're going to do research for the state. Like we're not doing anything subversive at all. We're just giving information for the state so that it can think about how to, to help with public health within the whole accepted environment of, the US, right? Like this is not a radical project. That itself is under attack. And, and universities in general, I mean, another thing with AI, right, is they're really trying to see how many of these jobs in knowledge production, knowledge, call it like collation, research, can we just replace by computing? And what is education going to look like, especially at, when you get to the post high school level? I mean, there's already been dramatic changes in K through 12, but what is it going to look like at the post high school level? Not so much. I mean, there is the attack on, so-called critical race theory and Black studies and decolonial studies and studying the Middle East. Like that is a project for sure. But that attack is going alongside, or is maybe more of a Trojan horse for a much broader attack on just the Western university as we have known it, um, which is just a really interesting thing in itself. I mean, I know you have a lot of critiques of the Western university. Your podcast is homage to those critiques, perhaps. And I do too. I mean, people probably think I'm weird because I'm always talking to people from academia and we're talking shit about academia at the same time. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a project that's really interesting in these times too. Um, where again, I think it's the importance of platforms like ours. Like one of the value adds that we've had is we've provided spaces for people to have conversations that they're not even really allowed to have within the academy and haven't been for years. Um, but that also again gets constituted as a threat at a certain point because they don't even like the conversations that are happening in the academy. So then what does that mean for people like us as well? So yeah, it's just some
Yeah.
thoughts.
No, and I have an example of this. I mean, earlier at the beginning of the show, you asked me, what shows I produce. I forgot to mention the Makdizi Brothers show. There's three brothers, Makdizi Brothers. It's called Makdizi Streets. And, about 6 months into our show, we had a scholar on from occupied Al-Quds. She teaches in a Zionist university. She's a 48 Palestinian, Nadera Shalhoub Kevorkian. And they watched a clip that I made. Okay, like I made that clip, then I circulated it to just promote our show. They took that clip out of context and said she was making excuses for, October 7th rapes. The rapes that never occurred, by the way,
Yeah.
which she wasn't even doing. She was saying, oh, if they did happen, not in my name. She actively said that. But so they used that to run her out of her job, and end her career there. I mean, she had a place to land and she's not leaving Palestine. So I think she did okay, but they arrested her, they strip searched her, they humiliated her. And that was for a clip that I made for a show. So, I mean, it's happened before to me where stuff that I've produced, where other people who've said stuff that I've produced that I use, like, oh, that's a great clip. That's really shareable, and it was shareable, in fact. And I was right, but it was a bad idea. It was bad for the people sharing. The people who wanted to share it used it to wage info war against this person who was articulating it. Now,
Yeah.
in the cases where it's happened to me, people who've done my show, I did an episode about, the Yugoslavia wars. Basically, the guest had to go into hiding afterwards. I'm sorry about that. She, if she's listening now, I don't think she is, but she basically had to go into hiding after that. She nuked her Twitter account because we had all these basically trolls come after the episode. I still haven't looked at the tweet for that episode. God, it's probably like a bloodbath. There's no point. But it's happened before on it happened on Red Nation podcast. Right after October 7th, Zionists were looking for these outrageous things that these outrageous people are saying. How outrageous! I am outraged, right? And like that's the machine they have. That's the machine they've perfected to do that kind of thing. And so in those moments when the panic sets in and they use the and it's also an important act of community building for them to go after people. Like this is what's so scary. The same way that Zionism is being held together by, psychotic, bloodlusting goons in Gaza who are killing openly and violently, like characters in like Heart of Darkness, basically, that they're like cosplaying Heart of Darkness. That's what they're doing. That this is keeping their society together. Right. Meanwhile, while their Air Force bomb defenseless civilians in tents, I think that a certain sector of American society is being pulled together, is being kept together by videos like the one of poor Mahmoud Khalil getting arrested, his wife, the anguish in his wife's voice, like, audible to everyone, like this is almost erotic for them. Right? Like they make those AI graphics. Like it's fucked, man. Americans have nothing but the fiction of their own power. Like American chuds have nothing but the fiction of their own American power to hold them together right now. Because it's certainly not a bigger national project, right? Like the White House is basically doing daily pump and dump schemes to enrich like 700 or 800 like goons, stock market goons, whoever call in fast as possible. Like that's basically the White House now, that like American power has declined so rapidly that, like, I mean, forget the ailing cities, forget the dead navy, forget, like, does the army even exist anymore? Like, and they're talking about starting a war with Iran, which we haven't even talked about. Like, this is not a country on the ascendance, right? Like, this is a
No.
country descending now. And this is what we all have to ask ourselves: like, will the American empire bring the entire planet with it? And I believe if that is the case, its little Zionist entity in our region will play the tip of the spear, tip of the spear role in that end. I believe that Zionists, and they say this themselves, I don't believe it, we know it, they say it themselves, they will gleefully nuke the region, starting with Iran, Iraq, Syria, maybe because it's close to them, they might rethink it, but they will gleefully nuke the region, and there will be nuclear winter if it were up to them, if they see their state going down. I believe they are in a state of Hitlerian decline, and they're in this, what did the psycho call it? The Clausewitz clause or whatever. It's like, it's just time to end it. I think that's what he called. I think that was, like, at least from what I remember from the movie Unterfall, the Untergang or whatever it's called, is that they called it the Clausewitz option, basically like destroy Germany because we're not worthy of this country, right? Which was basically like sort of Nazi-like thinking, which is imperialist thinking. Like, they've wrecked countries before. They have a history of it. They don't mind wrecking countries because their buddies rebuild things, so it's okay. Now so it's scary out there, folks. It's really scary, and I carry with me this anxiety that, I mean, forget me, whatever, I'll be fine. I worry about, like, the exposed people of our societies. I feel like the margin, like, people who aren't people like Mamadou, right? Like, people who don't. It's not. This is not pleasant to deport yourself. This is a violent act. And yes, it should be said right now that these are not new. Like, this violent deportation machine is very old in the US, and it's primarily been pointed towards a certain proletarian racialized underclass who doesn't have the media support that, say, Mahmoud Khalil has, who doesn't have the ability to muster up that kind of international outrage. Now, is it different what they're doing to guys like Khalil? Yes, in a sense, because the mediatic aspect of it is so important, because they want people filming. Whereas before, I don't think they wanted ICE raids filmed. I don't remember, like, I remember people talking about ICE raids. I remember a friend of mine in LA who worked at a school would talk about how ICE would show up and there would be a ghost town, like, at their school, right? So this is not new, right? We really have to insist on this. It's just now being unleashed into a sector of the population, and in a way that's done to it's red meat to their base, right? Like, that's what's scary. Like, shutting us down and flexing on us and, like, our class of people, which is to say, is red meat to their base, which is why they like doing it. Like, Rupio, and it's also like kowtowing to their Zionist, like, whatever compromat Epstein file they have on them, like John fucking Fetterman. God knows what they have on him, or Richie Torres, right? Like, these aren't people who are voluntarily being goons, right? Like, they're doing it because they're probably entrapped or paid or both, right? Like, it's not like, this is how it works. And so I think, long story short, there will come a time where this this empire thing won't be the dominant force in our geostrategic world. It's already happening. However, what the American empire will do as that influence and power declines, man, it is ugly. It is ugly, and it's going to get uglier.
First of all, I love the shot at Fetterman because I would just like to give 2 middle fingers to that motherfucker who is my senator in this state. By the way, I feel wonderful that Bob Casey lost, even though he lost to another Zionist ghoul, because I used to write this asshole letters and emails about Gaza and Cuba and all this, and he would send me back the worst freaking boilerplate responses about, the terrors of these regimes and how human rights need to be protected, and that's why we need to kill everybody and sanction them to hell and this and that. And, like, so anyways, fuck those guys. But yeah, the other point, let's see. So let's bring in some comments. There's like so much good stuff going on in the chat. So Francis says, shout out to Francis, they will stop because they're pitiful and collapsing from within. I don't exaggerate their power. Still counter hegemonic work and spaces are needed. Absolutely agree on that point. I'll pull Sina off while there we go. He's back with the good camera now. Also, folks, just some shout outs to you, Sina, folks who would be completely lost without you. Let's see. I think this is an important comment. What it really comes down to is, what are you willing to lose, and are you organized with a community? Mightness will do anything to defend itself. Absolutely. I mean,
Oh
this
yeah,
is the big thing. You made your comment earlier about people are disempowered, and I think that this is true, but it's really that people are not organized, and that they don't they've been disempowered to not understand the importance of community and of organization. And yeah, I mean, the point you made about talking to that, the guy playing volleyball and stuff like that, I mean, I have versions of that conversation all the time in my little suburban enclave, where it's like I will purposely inject Gaza or Palestine into a conversation with somebody who is generally, I think, a decent person, right? Like they're normies, yes, but like in most situations around them in their sphere, if something bad happened, like they would show up, they care about other people in their community and so on. But for some reason, there is a block that they cannot engage with what you talked about. I mean, like, just that over decades, like, people know that there are bad things that empire has done, but they actually consciously or unconsciously probably appreciate that their media class shields them from this crap. Like, and so
absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know yeah, and so, like, when I mention what I do, it's like, oh, there was an initial interest, like, because, yeah, fuck capitalism, right? Uh, you know, but then they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna check it out," and then they never mention it again. Because I'm sure that they probably did check it out, and then in, like, which is also something I have to take as a self-critique, right? Which is that, like, what we do actually doesn't we're not great at providing that on-ramp, the, like, let me hold your hand into this
That's
world that
true.
we're about to bring you into, right? The people who come here have already had some kind of, like, epistemological break with this whole system, and they're like, I'm looking for more to learn about this because this is really fucked, and I need to
Yeah,
understand more. I want to listen to people talk about this. Um, and so that's one thing. But yeah, if the normie watches or listens to what we do, they're like, "Oh no, like, you're crazy. Like, actually, I can't talk to you at all
yeah,
because you're a commie and, like, you're bad." Like, you're not quite Trump, because I know you agree with me on some things, but you're closer to that than my liberal friends who all have the Biden Harris or the Harris, what was her stupid running waltz? Yes, the Harris
yeah.
waltz signs in
Oh,
our uh in our signs, right?
so
In our
cringe.
yard, right? So there is a certain way in which I think we need to be honest that, like, some of our isolation is also based upon our approach to doing this work. And I think it's affirming to other folks like us who have come to the kind of analyses and views that we have. But it's not, I really value people who try, even though I can't really do this, to bridge that world. Like, I think about something like Citations Needed,
Yeah,
right? Where it's like he's, Adam and what's the
Nima,
Nima,
Nima
right?
Shirazi.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, they do really important work because they're like, look, we're going to watch all of your
yeah,
liberal media, right? And we're going to then break down for you, like, what are the problems with this? And we're going to do it in a way that liberals can step right into, but we're going to keep critiquing this every single week. And eventually you start to develop more of a systemic critique, right? Even if it's piece by piece, and maybe you always stay in that world. Like my father really loves content like that, he subscribes to Fair and like all that kind of stuff, and you get, Democracy Now, right? Another example. But I think that's our sphere in general has not figured out a good way to like conveyor belt people from that realm into our realm. And I don't know how easy or like what that project would be like. Maybe it's another podcast. But I do think that's something that you know, we are somewhat isolated partly because of the way that we are too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a question because I earlier I basically I put it on others, and I said, we live in this depoliticized media realm, and yeah, it's not fun to talk about the bombing of Yemen, right? It's not fun content, and I guess the role is what does media do for you, right? Like in German, I always found it like in German, the word for entertainment, it's like Unterhaltung. It's like to hold you under, to like hold you under, and it's like it's putting you down, and it's like that is something, and I think that like you can kind of hear that in the word entertain, right? Is that you're kind of detained, retained, like you're tained, whatever the tained means. You're not tainted. That's different. You're not taint. That's even worse. But like media does this thing of holding us, and it is intimate in our lives. And like I've said this before, and I know it sounds silly, but like when you listen to me or anyone, right, especially for like long periods of time, like we're going on 2 hours, okay, this is a whole movie and then some. uh and like when you listen to us for 2 hours, especially if you're like walking or doing, and you have like headphones on, I am screaming into your ear box. Like I am yelling directly into your brain, like as loud as humanly possible. Yeah, I normalize it to minus 10 decibels, but like that is an intimate connection that I think ultimately is not in the interest of capitalists for us to forge connections with alternative media. Now, that's why guys like Joe Rogan exist, I feel, to make sure that the people who are disaffected by the legacy, which is a lot of people of our generation, that they end up in the normie chudverse of Joe Rogan and his like, wow,
Yeah.
wow, wow, like just whatever anyone says to them, he believes. And it's his producers who like basically decide the content of his show, who say, okay, Joe, we're bringing this chud on, where you're just going to nod your head and say wow for 45 minutes and get $3 million. Like that's kind of his role, right? Like that normie verse, and it captures it. And that's like that is something we have to work on, of like, how come we can't capture those guys? Why can't we get that audience? I think that when things ultimately go really really bad, like I think in the next few months or maybe a year or 2 years, like this Trump regime will will speed up the enshittification of America, I think, and it will manifest in media in different ways. But I think ultimately Americans are simply, and this is a bleak view, and I'm sorry to the Chad, whoever hears this, but Americans are simply too provincial. They're too small minded and too ignorant to take on their ruling class in in a global sort of information frame. Okay, I think they could take them on. I think they could take them on the streets. I have faith in Americans. Faith is not the word. I have faith. Someone's gonna isolate that and play that in like the Tankie verse. I have faith in Americans. What has Cena done? No, I have faith on the streets that if there was a kind of mass mobilization, it would have to be far bigger than what we saw in 2010, mind you. It would have to be like a sizable chunk of the US population, like to the point of, we're talking like 20%, we're talking like 50 million people or something like that. And it would take basically, and it would basically cripple major cities. And that would be the only way I could see a kind of transformational halt in the support of, say, like, let's say right now, the Zionist war machine. I could see like cities being shut down as like, okay, let's just take it back. I could see that happening. Would it? Like, would it actually like play out that way? Like, what's the likelihood? I don't know. But it is one outcome of like 50 million people taking to the streets. Now, that's I'm putting the cart before the horse here by saying that, because how do you get 50 million people on the streets is the problem, right? And if how do you get over that provincialism, that numbness to the world, and also, and I think the first thing is to get them to look. I think the joke that I always make is the gif from the scene from Clockwork Orange, right, where the guy's eyes are forced open. That's part of our job, is to say like here, like my Twitter feed is like a bloodbath of violent imagery, and I'm sure people have muted me. My engagement's all down because our culture over here looks at that and looks down upon it. So Sina, you're spreading gore. You're spreading gore porn. That's gore. You're mainlining gore porn, as that stupid fucking dude on Twitter once said. And I said, no, man, like this, you talk about seeing the truth. You talk about looking at the world. You talk about this goes back to freaking Plato, right? Like, you want to leave the cave? Let me show you what's outside the freaking cave. It's like corpses. It's a lot of corpses. And until we're ready as a society, as like people in our Anglophone world, to honestly look at that violence and look at it in a way that's like, holy shit, and not the way Zionists look at it, and Chuds too, which is to rally around that death as like a flag, which is really where we are. But like the people who are sane and normal and not bloodthirsty freaks, which I think, maybe probably 70% of the American population, maybe that's pushing it. Maybe let's say 60, but I think a solid majority of them are actual human beings with blood in their veins and can be brought to humanize. And I think we're seeing the cost of the genocide in the support for the Zionist entity in the US, which has even endured somehow because of their media power, because they have ability to sort of shut down the representation of this. But really, you have to do the uncomfortable thing of showing people. I think that's the only way. And mind you, if I start showing corpses on my show on YouTube, if I start actually playing videos instead of like, oh, let's look at this bombing from Yemen, they will nuke your account. Because they have the bots that look for that kind of stuff. Like, it's not it's one, like, they wouldn't even let you show you Hassan Nasrallah's face. Imagine if you actually played like some of the like Hezbollah's like history, like their successful campaigns, like what they've been able to achieve. Like, this would be like, wow, this looks a lot like something I've seen. Like, and I think this is where the culture industry comes in for Americans specifically, but for the Anglophone world in general, is that it supplants the world with this fictional SpongeBob view of the world, where everything is a cartoon and everyone's a Marvel hero and you can be Iron Man too, and this is the role that violence plays. And so you can take you remove the real ugly violence that the US perpetuates, that the US thrives on, in fact, exports, imports, whatever. And then you replace it with a cartoonish image of your own power, which then is aestheticized violence, which is beautiful violence, which is played up for pleasure and for money in the end, right? Which is what any text is in capitalism, any cultural work, is that that's what you get. You get this result of this volleyball dude beside me, and being like, oh, that's too complicated for me. Like, the guy knows every single thing about volleyball. He knows the player position, everything. This guy's like a coach, basically. He was really good. And he can't, I was like, dude, it's not that complicated. One side does genocide, the other side does liberation. Have you seen Star Wars? You should remember Star Wars. It's those guys. Like, let me translate it for you in burger talk, right? Like, it's not, this stuff isn't complicated, but it's the emotional range of our societies that's the problem, that they're not able in their hearts to look at that armless Palestinian girl on my Twitter feed yesterday, the baby with like one arm, right? Like, they can't look at that. Whereas our part of the world, part of the world I come from, they put a camera there and they show it for 20 minutes, right? Like, they put a camera over a bomb crater, they show people carrying out the arms and limbs, right? And it's done intentionally to say, oh, look, this is the violence they do to us. So I don't know how we view violence, I think, is a core, and how we consume it. and how and on whose terms and to whose benefit. This is something we have to talk about. This is something that we have to reckon with. I mean, we've been going on for over 2 hours now. We probably should stop soon, but this is not. It's a core issue. It's a core issue. Violence. We have to see it. You have to see it, and you have to recognize what it's done. Like, you have to see the pictures of the guy run over a tank to recognize that Israel is nothing but a terror death machine, a death cult, as we say online. And
Yeah.
they will, and let those images radicalize you. Let them. That's what they're for. That's why you see them. That's why photography exists, is to show you the realities of the world. It's not so you can AI doctor an image of, you know, American workers, like corpulent American workers making socks in a factory or something with AI, and you have a hood over it, right? Like most things we see are candy, are popcorn. It's not nourishing for us, right? It's not nourishing to our brains. It's either some part of some info war, or it's just designed to distract us. Society of the
Yeah.
spectacle. So we have to break out of that mode, and it's painful. It's really painful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned I can't replicate the German for entertainment, but that's interesting. I mean, I always think about, like, even in Spanish, it's like, things would translate, like sports would translate to well, like, you get the connection to diversion, right? But also pastime in the United States too. Like, we
Yeah.
always used to talk about baseball as America's pastime, right? And it's like, it's not America's sport, right? It's literally how they make you sit down for 4 hours and not think about anything else, like,
And spend
and so
money
yeah.
while you're doing it and be infused, and also to diffuse any radical energy you may have into this abstract scene of, like, I mean, we should have Nate on. We should have Nate here from End of Sport, my old friend Nate, to talk about this, because it is a tool to diffuse that revolutionary energy that people have built up in them. I sincerely believe that. Yeah, entertainment and German Hasselhoff. Like, I sincerely believe that's the purpose of a lot of this entertainment culture, is to take those feelings you have inside of you and activate them, but to do so in a safe, controlled, private environment where you can't infect others and you can't make connections with people in your neighborhood and your community and your comrades and your coworkers, and you could talk about the problems in your life and the problem people in your life, God forbid, the landlords, if you're a tenant, and that kind of stuff. This is not in their interest. It's better for you to be at home watching content about people fighting their landlords, their terrorizers, their whatever, right? It's better for them to do that, because it's a controlled burn that way.
Yeah, right on. Somebody said this is why you have outrage when sports players get political. Yeah, absolutely. It's you take the it's my favorite version of this is when right wingers get pissed off when Rage Against the Machine people, like, say, tweet something political out or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, you guys are just rock stars. You're musicians. Like, what do you, like, stop being political?" And it's like, yo, you literally listened to this music in the 90s or early 2000s, and you didn't take anything political away from it, like. But it's true, there are a whole, I grew up around people who are now right-winger cops in their family who loved Rage Against the Machine, and it's like, what the hell, so yeah, anyway. All right, let's go through a few more chat comments, and I think, Sina, we should do another episode for Iran, maybe next week if you can,
Yeah,
or
let's
whatever,
do it.
so that we can
Sure.
actually talk about that
I
in
know we
more
didn't talk anything
detail.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and it's important to talk about. There's actually, yeah, uh, I was gonna make a joke that you're like the boy who cried wolf with regard to Iran, but I realized that we're always on the precipice
Yeah.
of, like, a US-Iranian war when we have a
That's what it
conversation.
feels
So
like. That's what it feels like
yeah,
sometimes. It's like, oh, here we go again. War with Iran, this movie. Here we go
yeah,
again. I mean, they are at, I mean, also, I mean, I'll say this. This is the only thing I'll say on this, but it's like, because we're going on long, but I mean, I want to take questions. But they are at war with Iran. This war is ongoing. Is that
yeah,
it's just the scale of it is what's always in question. And the
right,
same is true for Gaza. The same is true with Syria. The same is true with Lebanon, right? Like, these wars are ongoing. It's just how media represents them is in direct correlation with their heat, with the heat of that war. So as the heat goes up, the media coverage goes up. And we know that's not actually the case, though, in Palestine, because it's not actually good to turn up the heat on their Zionist ally, because, it's the Zionist ally and you have to coddle it. And you have to, it's
Yeah.
the precious little baby.
Yemen's a good example too. Like, Yemen is never in the media. The only time that Yemen has been in the media for the last year has been a leaked signal chat to a Israeli prison guard. Like, that's it. Like, there's masquerading as the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, by the way. But all right. So comments. I'm just going through comments. Keep seeing people talking about keeping their heads down for the next 4 years as if that's going to make a difference. Yeah, this is the general liberal mood right now, I think. Maybe even in some radical left-wing circles. It's understandable. I think, as an impulse. I think it's the wrong one, but it is understandable. Let's see. There's like a third of the world that doesn't have internet. No, I could be very wrong on that. I haven't checked on the stat in a while. I don't know the statistics, but certainly there are a lot of areas of the world where, access is much, much more limited. And their engagement with it is, way different than what we have in the West. There's also, I think it's important to say, there's also a lot of countries where the technology is way more advanced, and when you go to them, you're like, holy fuck, why don't we have this in the United States? And then you realize that the United States is not the most advanced power in the world, but it just like doesn't allow certain things in because they're made in China or whatever. And like, yeah, so that's somebody. So is this the journalist you were talking about earlier, Gonzalo Lira?
Gonzalo. Yeah, Gonzalo. They just killed him. Straight up killed an American citizen. No problem. Nothing happened. He died in prison. Oh, probably tortured to death. This is where we are. I mean, I don't think. The problem with saying something like that is that this is non-novel in a sense, right? Because American regime dissidents die in prisons all the time. It's just the brazenness with which the allies of the imperial powers get to act. So Israelis routinely murder people in their concentration camps. They rape women, sexually assault women, men, all kinds of things. They sexually assault people to death, right? Like, these things are out there, but the lack of concern is the main weapon, right? And so when they have so much concern, is like when it's happened in Iran and Syria, right? Like, they used concern to wage war. Like, I say this a lot, and I'll say it again. Like, concern is a weapon of Western imperial hegemony, because they deploy that concern to signal like wider audiences is, oh, this is our priority now, right? Like, oh, we're concerned about the Muslims of Yugoslavia. We're very concerned about them, and we are going to park our NATO assets there for the next 30 years. Just so happens to be close to Russia. It just so happens to be in this important location, right? Like, that concern for Bosnian Muslims was used to was used to accelerate and destroy a large sovereign country, right? Like, that concern for Syrians helped wage, was the catalyst to bring to cult. It was the catalyst, right? It wasn't a catalyst, but it was part of the war campaign to destroy a country using $2 trillion of resources pooled together by the worst actors on the planet, who then paid a comprador army around the world to sell it as liberation. Okay, that's where we are in Syria, right? It's a smaller scale. It's probably the biggest psyop of all time. Probably the biggest psyop of all time is Syria. I will die on this hill for the rest of my life if I have to. But no way did a bunch of like reactionary freaks from Uzbekistan and Uyghurs and Chechens come together naturally. These are mercenaries. These are Contras, right? And they're sold as liberators to you. And now they have carved up Syria into multiple zones to control it and to defang it, right? Zionists have carved it up. There's Israeli ones and Turkish ones, right? And we had an entire swath of our so-called political alliance making the case for this, helping sell this. And now they're working in exact inverse by keeping quiet on the chaos that they helped sell as liberation. right? So 30,000, 30, like, so you scream about, oh, Assad, human rights violations, oh, Dara, oh, the people of this, oh, the people of that, oh, they want to fall the regime. Okay, then now 30,000 Alawites have fled from the coast. There's thousands of them sitting in a Russian military base taking refuge, like Hotel Rwanda scale crises, right? Like things that happen right in other parts of the world, like are happening in Syria right now, and it's not no one's making a peep about it, but Syrian journalists, because that's the tool, that's the weapon. Concern, when imperialists are concerned for people, that's when you know something bad's gonna happen. Okay,
Yeah.
that should be like an iron law of your political consciousness. Is that, oh, you're concerned for Cubans? Oh, an op is coming, right? And that's something that you have to reckon with in your media, in our lives. Is that the people who are respectable, nice, clean faced, like, oh, tell us about this, like a little interesting, smart person. Like a lot of these people are actually there to wage information war, to be like the end user site of a vast information war. And if you can't point it out, if you can't critique it, you're weak. A lot of people can't. Like they can't stand it. They can't see it. They see it as, oh, it's just this. Oh, like they'll make excuses for the Syrian compradors. They'll just make excuses for them and say, oh, the regime was this and that. It's like, no, man, this is the most advanced comprador army in the world. If you can't see it, it's like you're being dishonest. But it's unpleasant to hear this stuff for a lot of liberals and for a lot of lefties too. Like I'm sure a lot of people are pissed off listening to this now. Is that, oh, the regime was bad? So yeah, it was. Wait till you see the new regime. Wait till you see this new government, right? Like they defanged an independent, like vastly important country to the Palestinian liberation struggle, and they got Palestinian media people to help sell it as liberation. They got actual Palestinian militants to fight for them. Like there's a scene in Syria that I'll never forget, which is like Hamas guys are coming up against, or like guys who trained on tunnel equipment given to them by Iranians. They brought it to Syria and are using it against the government, against the very people who trained them. And there's like a scene somewhere where these two forces come together and are like, hey, you're doing this to us? Like this is like what happened in Syria will never stop like running in my brain. And of course, it's just one theater of war. Like Libya is another one, Iraq is another one, Yemen's another one, Iran may soon be another one. It has been obviously, but it like may recur into another one. And so for me, it's, you do have to look, it's painful, it occupies your life, you'll be going about your day happily doing your thing, and then you're like, oh yeah, the Syria dirty war. Like da, da, da. It's like the Ben Affleck being sad, like like thinking about what evil there is in our world and how it's sold to us as liberation. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts. And then they tell you that people fighting for liberation are evil. It's backwards, man. We live, up is down, black is white, blue is red, the sky is sea. That's it. And we're just little people out here trying to figure it all out. That was a down home way of finishing this episode.
It's all right. We got more comments, so we can get it back up, Sina. All right. So yes, it is pretty garbage what AI
Yeah.
produces. I think that this was something I wanted to make a connection. I forgot to mention it. So the other day, Spotify removed 100 episodes of Revolutionary Left Radio. They also emailed us.
Wow.
They took down 2 of our episodes.
Whoa.
So
I wonder if they did that to mine. I should check.
They may. You might need to check your email. So what they're doing right now is they're using AI to find copyright infringements that they didn't ever care about before or didn't target before. And a lot of this is very benign stuff. It's like, I mean, in Rev Left's case, it's that they used to feature like independent artists and or like old it's just music. And the two that for us were the same thing. It was like an episode where like Fred Moten had referenced a song, and so he was like, if you could play it, and so we played it, right? And it was like old Gil Scott Heron, Esther Phillips, like these kinds of artists, right? And again, like Brett made the point in his monologue the other day that none of this hurt any artists, right? If anything, you're exposing work that people aren't familiar with, or artists that like don't have any promotional apparatus around them at all, that then a few thousand people are going to hear, and they might be like, oh, you know what, like, I want to go check out that song. So they might actually get revenue as a result of it, because people like pennies, but because people go listen to it on Spotify or Tidal or whatever else, right? But these are whatever, like, this is the Digital Copyright Act. This is how this stuff works. So there's that. But part of the connection to what I was saying earlier about all the things that AI does, right, is that if it's sophisticated enough to do that, and to do it across however many thousands of podcasts, I mean, maybe million podcasts that there are on their freaking platform, right? And to send out these notices within a week to people, right? I got mine like maybe a day after Brett got his, right? So like, if they can do that, then they can absolutely weaponize that for certain watchwords, for certain analyses that they don't want, and so on, right? And so, yes, AI is still fairly stupid, and I'll probably get some kind of attack by AI. I'm just saying, like, we are in iRobot where the robots turn against us already, except that it's not. I mean, that's the scam, right? Because it's really, the problem is always that the robots are in service of the ruling class, right? And so if we controlled the robots, then we could do good things with them. And sometimes it feels that way, right? Because we might use AI to help us edit our episode. And whose labor is that hurting? It's just my own, because I'm the person who normally edits our episode, right? Or we might use it to make a transcript, right? And so these are very, academics might use it to collate a data set or something like that, right? Like, so there's these practical applications that are time saving, even for workers. But ultimately, this system is owned by the capitalists, and they can weaponize it in all kinds of ways, right? So that is part of this, like, surveillance tech, internet, YouTube, Spotify, like all of this stuff that we have that we can use in certain ways. It is also the threats that are posed by these things. And how do you get around that? I mean, it is more like grassroots stuff. But like, going back to Therese Burton Stelly's book, I mean, in the 1920s and 30s, they were like weaponizing the postal service to stop communists from spreading their newsletters, and to go after Marcus Garvey and all of this stuff, right? So it's like, they'll always find a way, right? And I mean, that's not to make them all powerful or anything else, but it is just to say that, like, this is not a new playbook, but they have these technologies, just give them more levers and more things that they can pull, even as we can use them for these kind of counter hegemonic discourses and so on. All right, what's the beef with Eve Tuck? Someone asked.
Uh-oh. Well, so I had no beef. I have no beef. I have nobody. I have no. It's just more that I posted. Someone sent me a letter that Eve Tuck wrote. She released a statement shortly after October 7th. It basically, I don't know the actual story behind it, but I think she had just gotten her job. She had a new job at NYU, and she in the past had spoken positively about, Palestinian liberation, and, she's an indigenous person herself. So this is an indigenous person talking about other indigenous people liberating themselves. So you can understand it that the Zionists at her institution obviously heard this. They took it to heart, and probably, I don't know, I'm speculating here, but probably said, hey, you like this new job of yours, this new fancy pants job that you got? You like keeping it? You want to keep it? You better sign this statement that says you disavow all things in support.
I heard she was actually being sued.
Okay, I could believe that too. They use all kinds of things, but
I don't know that for a fact, but somebody told me that was why she released the statement, was because she was being sued by them, and she had to do something to kind of, it was part of a settlement or whatever to get out of the lawsuit, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that they put the screws to her, and so they forced her to read this statement, which basically said that, which did the Zionist thing of, October 7th was bad and bad. And so somewhere along the line, her principles, if she had them, they gave way to the material reality of her situation, which was she didn't want to lose her job. And in the midst, she chose to throw Palestinian liberation, indigenous liberation, in effect, under the bus. And so I didn't think much of it. I just made a funny tweet. I make lots of critical tweets of people. I didn't think this one would catch on. I realized after the fact that yeah, she is. It did have some reach, that tweet, but also because probably Elon's Twitter sensed that blood was in the water for some libs, and owning the libs is triggering the libs is what the whole point of their existence is. So yeah, it made quite a stink. I don't feel bad for what I did. I mean, she wrote the letter. She signed the letter. There's going to be
Yeah,
consequences to sign the letter. You shouldn't have, thrown away your principles. What would I do in that situation? I mean, I would never be in that situation because NYU would never hire me for a prominent
right.
position. So I wouldn't know what I would do. I guess this is what I meant about it being a clarifying moment.
Yeah, I mean, and this connects to what Sterling's saying here. The impression is here job networks are closed to us. And I mean, that's certainly true for you and I, Sina.
Yeah,
It's like we are
no one's ever
like
hiring me. Maybe
no,
Daisy.
I mean, and it is also why I do like people might wonder why sometimes I do, promote the Patreon as much as I do or try to is like literally this is there are a few other avenues. Like I said, I did work in a bookstore for 6 months last year, like where I can get jobs either at places that are politically okay with me, or where maybe I'm so little of a but especially with the level of surveillance, I mean, you Google my name, like it,
Yeah,
it's gonna come up with some shit that most employers really don't want to see,
yeah.
from a prospective client, and it doesn't, or I mean, prospective employee. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there is, and I know Sterling, organizer, activist, all that kind of stuff too, and also just anybody who's in academia right now too, who's getting a PhD, like the job market for academics is horrible. I mean, and because it's literally they're cutting jobs. They're not actually trying to open up more jobs or expand at this point. So yeah, all of those things are realities, right? And it's just gonna, require us to be in community with each other and figure things out. Russell, oh, good to see you, Russ. Always good. We are in a time as a community where we have to show and prove in the smallest ways in order to take meaningful steps. And I think
Oh yeah,
that's really good
Russell.
advice.
Oh yeah.
Um, because yeah, I mean, it's I think that's a really important piece of advice, right? Because it is a time where it's like people feel like, oh, like we're small, we're incapable, we haven't been able to stop this genocide in Gaza, which obviously is a moment of humility for all of us, um, and pain and suffering of our own kind, nothing akin to what people are actually, feeling in Gaza or Yemen or Syria. But nonetheless, I think it is really important to keep putting one foot in front of the other and taking steps every day, and doing what you can. And hopefully what we do is some small part of that. And, this is why Sina keeps me sane. This is exactly what. And so, yeah, I mean, if we can play that role of keeping good people of the world sane, then, that's huge to us.
It's my honor. It's my eternal honor that people come and listen to this stuff. They spend their time with us. What about posting some of your videos on OnlyFans or Pornhub? Yeah, maybe people
Maybe. I'm
people
not
will pay
showing
me
my
to put my
toes. That's
clothes
the
back
only thing I
on.
was.
Maybe I'll try that. I'll do reverse OnlyFans. I feel like it's where do you, like yeah, you have to go where the people are. Where are the people? They're on these big sites. And yeah, you have to just kind of do that. I mean, and if they squish you, they squish you. They squish you and they stomp you out. Then you start a new account, or you go and recreate another shows. You do other shows. Like if they shut down East of the podcast, to the next day I start the East is a podcast too. Like, I don't care.
Right.
Like just
Yeah.
nuke me. You're gonna have to get me off the internet if you want me to stop this. Because I don't plan on ever going back to a normal life. Like I just think of like the poor, like I think of like me sitting down to do my CV and then I like show it to someone. They're like, so there's a gap in your resume. It's about 7 years long. What have you been doing? It's like, oh, just some stuff. Talking on the internet, jibber jabber, that kind of thing. Nothing too big. But yeah, you don't when you
Middle
engage.
Eastern history,
Yeah, a little bit of Middle Eastern history. That's all. Just a little bit of chat. I think that yeah, we're now in this game for real. I mean, we should do our long. I mean, this is hidden. This is backroom stuff here. But Jay and I have been talking about doing long form content together, related to. I don't know. We have to talk. We won't say the actual subject matter, but we're interested in doing long form content because it doesn't. It's
Documentaries and stuff
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
documentaries. It scratches a different itch for me in terms of production. I've been doing a little bit for Red Nation, and it does. And it's composed of the same material. Like first person interviews, talking head, that kind of stuff. Archival material. It is basically the same kind of tools, but it's just longer. I mean, if we did a 2.5 hour documentary, that's a lot more work than a 2.5 hour podcast episode. Let me tell you. But it is the kind of work I feel people can sit down. You can actually get into the algorithm. I feel like if there's any way you can get into the algorithm is through this kind of stuff. Is through longer form stuff, and we do have to sit down and finally get going on this, Jay.
Yeah, it's I guess a good time. Although all of the places that we would ask for money for this are probably been nuked by Marco Rubio. So, you know, or will be soon. Um, all right. So yes, AI is the new tool of repression and surveillance. We are being forced to use it at work, despite the fact that we don't need it. We work to make AI better so it can learn to surveil us better. I have to say, like, even I had someone reach out and offer a lot of money. I don't know if this has happened to you, to say they want to use our entire catalog to train AI. And I didn't do it, even though it was like more money
What?
than I
Really?
make in a year.
Wow.
Uh,
I have
but
no
I
one's ever
was
done
like,
that for me. Jeez.
but I didn't do it because like I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, you want to create the AI like Fred Moten, or you want to create that like what are the ethical questions for
Yeah.
me to even answer that? Like, I don't own these people who have come on my podcast and
Yeah.
shared their ideas and their voices and so on. Like, and the only thing I can think is that, I mean, who knows the reason why they would do this, but I think that they're trying to think of this is again to lead to our obsolescence,
Yeah.
is that they're trying to imagine a world where there are just AI podcasts,
Yeah.
right? Where
It's true.
like it is just, we have our AI Fred Moten or Steven Salida or whatever, and like they're just, you
Yeah,
know,
I seen it, Ramani. Oh god.
and so I mean, so it's a crazy world right now with that stuff. The ICE thing. So isn't it to help liberals sell their version of fascism? Filming ICE makes it into media only when conservatives are in control. This is a spot on analysis. It is. I mean, and it's also, I do feel a certain way about this moment and how shitty it is to just undocumented people in the United States, or people who have had undocumented family members in the United States for decades, right? Who are now being, I think somebody said this, but I don't know if I caught it, but yeah, like people get uh, they get there's apps where you can self-deport right now, and there's like pressure on, like, especially for parolees, if you have like some kind of conviction, however small, they're sending mass communication out to all these people of like, here's how you self-deport, right? I mean, what a dystopian thing this is, right? um and so there's a way in which the focus, especially the liberal focus, on like the one innocent guy who gets sent to the prison in El Salvador, not to, I know more of them are innocent than that, but like there was this one person in particular that got lifted up and was on CBS, his family was, and all of this, and like, and obviously that person should be released and should come back to the United States, no question. But like that type of media also is very complicit in saying, hey, those other 299 guys that were sent down there, like they're all the worst and the worst and should not be in our country, right? And then that, and another layer, you know, is like there's never going to be a discussion of what the United States has done to Venezuela through hybrid war, again, similar to Syria, Iran, and so on, even though it hasn't been as much of a hot war as like Syria has been. But certainly in terms of attacking their infrastructure, their power grids, like sending CIA, little, stormtroopers to make landings and get repelled by like indigenous militants, in Venezuela and so on. I mean, and the level of sanctions, which are just insane. I mean, the level of sanctions that Venezuela has been under, we still unfortunately haven't been able to create a vocabulary or a discourse around sanctions in this country to really be able to communicate to people, I don't think, of how horrible these things are, and the consequences of them. So, yeah, I mean, so whatever. I mean, that was a long tangent, but I'm just saying that there's a mundane level, an accepted everyday level of anti-immigrant, anti-undocumented sentiment in this country that has become so normalized and so accepted by liberals at this point too, that it's frustrating because anytime we're talking about a Mahmoud Khalil, or it's like it becomes this like, oh, they didn't do anything wrong, they didn't really break any laws, like, and it's just like none of this shit is okay. Like, we don't need to normalize all these other systems of repression and violence just to highlight that what they're doing to Mahmoud is also horrible and violent and not shouldn't be allowed either. But we've allowed so much of this shit to be normalized that, it just doesn't register for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a brutal. We live in the bad place. I mean, this is the bad part of the world. Every rogue. I mean, this is the true. The mark of a true tankie is if you can like hold the thought in your brain, is that, oh, all the bad things that happen in other countries, in the bad countries, they happen here, but to the power of 100, right? Like the slave armies, the police killings, the repression of rights, all that stuff, the violence against like the gendered violence, it's all that, and then this entire concernosphere that is like around where we live. This is not. This is not like a. This is not. This is a machinery that covers all of that up, right? That obfuscates the very dark reality. I mean, this is the thing we said in our first episode. I still remember it to this day. We have this human rights apparatus. It points outwards, right? And that's it. Like that's really the basic fundamental thing, is that you have this, pretty vast. I mean, it's not that vast, but it's a pretty sizable chunk of the population who's dedicated to concerning themselves with the world, right? But and usually it's specific countries and specific parts of the world, and oftentimes it's consists of compradors who are telling us what we already know. But I think ultimately, like that if you can't reconcile the fact that those bad things happen in this country, then like you can't start, you can't begin that, because then you still think that other place that like the bad places are out there. It's like, no, bro, the bad place is right here where you're standing. It always has been. It's been the worst place ever. Like, you can't even fathom the evil things that happen in American jails and prisons. Like, I mean, you don't need to fathom them. You hear about them. You can go
Yeah,
and look them up. There's podcasts about them. You can see, the daily occurrences, and yet you still get in a situation where one Iranian woman and her untimely death, is mourned by literally thousands of media professionals in the world, around the world, in English, Dutch, French, German, like everyone writing articles about this one woman that they had never heard of before. That is a symbol. Like, this is a game. This is a violent game. Like, I will never get over this stuff, that how they play this game of concern. Like and it's the same. I mean, it's similar to how Zionists play. They use the language of anti-racism to do racism, okay, in the pursuance of genocide, which is the worst kind of racism, which is like the most violent kind of racism. It's nuts. It's nuts. We live in a maddening world, and if you can't, like, if you don't, people making jokes about, Tankie therapy keeping you sane. It's not that Tankie therapy keeps you sane. It's that these ideas, like being reminded that you're not crazy, that like, oh, I'm not like, because they gaslight you into thinking that, oh, you're the extremist, like, oh, you're the one. And it happened to me on a recent show I did with a liberal that I ended up squashing. That I said no, because the liberal was like, the host was like, oh, I'm gonna add a warning to this episode, a discretion. And I was like, what am I, a box of cigarettes? Like, what is this? Like, you're gonna get cancer listening to my voice? Like, I was so offended that I canceled the episode. I said it's not worth talking to liberals when they're this, not just irrelevant, but where they're this far behind that they can't even see like what's basically in front of them. That, yeah, like we're past the points of needing liberals to come around. Now we're past that, way past that.
Yeah. Yeah, you certainly can't pin your hopes to it for sure. So I'm first of all very sorry to hear this, that your friend's son was murdered by prison guards. Very common, and this is in the quote unquote progressive Washington state. Never made any news, right? And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, obviously there was some news around the New York State prison guards recently killed a man on video, right? And so that did cause some outrage. But then, of course, that caused the prison guards union to do a wildcat strike to because they were being you know told that that they had to follow laws and not kill people. And so yeah, that's too, it's, I mean, that's very much like Zionism too, right? Like, of like, hey, we're gonna boycott this whole thing now because you're, you know, talking about the fact that we're having a debate in our cabinet about whether it's okay to rape Palestinians, and most of us agree that it is okay to rape Palestinians if they're in prisons, right? You know, that's that. Just in case anybody thinks I'm being hyperbolic, that actually is a real thing that happened. All right, one last question for you, Sina. Have you tried to get Matt Christman? I don't know who this person is, on
Oh,
for a
Matt
debate or
Christman,
dialogue.
he's one of the Chapo guys. I mean, Matt, I would love to have Matt on. He's an interesting guy. Uh, he's been pretty sick. I don't know how he's doing. Is he? I don't think he's on the show anymore. Um, I actually, I think Felix is great too. You know, the Chapo guys, they do what they do well. I guess I would say that what's limiting is because I would say their audience is American primarily, and their audience is afflicted with the same problem that I think a lot of Americans have, which is provincialism. And you know, the host too, I would say, I think like less, I would say Felix is probably the most interested in the world outside of the US. I don't begrudge Americans for being as insular as they are. I think with the tools, with the media tools and the educational tools they've been given, this is a natural result of narcissism and insularity and thinking the world doesn't exist. It's also, America is a big freaking place, so it feels like a world unto itself. Like between California and New York is a planet, what feels like it is like 300 million or 350 million people, and they're, you know, from every part of the world. It's an entire continent of different geographies. So there is this feeling I feel in Americans that like, oh, we live in a world unto itself, and we might as well behave as if we're a world unto ourselves. So I wouldn't say necessarily the Chapo guys are guilty of that. I think they are probably more interested in the world. But yeah, if you look at their content, it's mostly Americans talking to Americans about American issues, and that's what their audience is. And so we're already behind the eight ball talking about these things that aren't local, so to speak, or aren't national, because that itself is smaller, and doesn't do as well as, say, you know, like making fun of the latest guffaw on the part of some conservative Christian evangelical, you know, like anti-gay crusader, how he was caught cruising in a bathroom at an airport. Like, that's fun. Like, that is fun content to make. It's fun content to consume. But is it nourishing? No, it's not.
Right.
It's fun,
Yeah,
but it's not like
it
good
is
for
fun.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's Cheetos.
On that note, on other things, I mean, this is I did one with Alex Avina earlier this week, but you know, you and I should do this. We've talked about doing this as more like movie discussions and stuff like that, you know, because I think there is a way to do some of this work. I think actually Jared Ball's another person who does a good job with this kind of work of like, we watch the shitty liberal or imperialist or whatever video, and you can critique a lot of these things from an anti-imperialist perspective or an anti-systemic perspective. But yeah, that's not generally the the project of whether it's Hassan, although Hassan's politics I think are pretty good, or Chapo or whatever. Like, it is more like this, like having fun with these people who are just ridiculous. I mean, and again, I do think a lot of that does provide a certain kind of service, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
it does.
necessarily
It
convey
does. It
people
does.
into like a movement. Yeah.
Yeah, ridicule is a powerful weapon. It's just the problem is that's the only thing you're allowed to do in the US. You're only allowed to ridicule, and if you take it past ridicule and you actually take some sort of cogent critique and attack the centers of power with anything other than like humor and derision, then and like not a substantive thing, or if you say talk about things that are offensive to imperialists, like resistance to imperialism, yeah, you're going to get a freaking target on your back, and they're going to come up with excuse after excuse to get you. I mean, look, the Tankie verse did a very poor job on Ukraine. Let me say, like our Tankie verse, because it's hard to. I think it's hard for us. I don't think there's a lot of overlaps between our Tankie verse and say Russia, and like where like Russians who are fighting U.S. imperialism, which is what they are doing. Like I don't like that's really what they are fighting in Europe, but they're doing it on their terms, in their context, in their language. And I don't think there's much overlap. There's the sort of Russians with attitudes guys who are basically the only ones who are out there kind of putting the a kind of counter perspective. Otherwise, it's all Ukros and their liberal allies, because Ukros are a special little boy of the liberal media, right? That's like the same way Zios are. That's the way they treat Ukro fascists. That is not nuke Ukro communists, because if they did, they would have to like look at the other side, obviously. But like we didn't do a very good job on talking about Russia, talking about what happened. It was so fast. Their crazy decapitation strike on Russian media in English, that we were all just like, and we still don't talk about Ukraine. We still don't talk about, not that much, partly because libs ruined it by talking about it in the way they did. And they were like, oh, Ukraine this, Ukraine that. So when it reaches to us, it makes it like, oh, I don't like, oh, the libs are doing it. The libs are going crazy. And which is to say, they're not doing it anymore. They stopped doing it after 6 months, after they saw that they were going to lose. But also, it's the fact that there's not a kind of, let's say, natural alliance of sort of pro-Russia people and are in our Tankie sphere. Like there are a little bit, but they're definitely not, and they definitely aren't primarily in the Anglophone world, I would say. And so we have not done a good job, I would say. I know personally I haven't, talking about that war, because it is a proxy war on the scale of Syria. I think those Syria and Ukraine wars are twinned. I think that they are two of the same kind of an almost kind of pincer movement on a shared enemy. I would say I think it half worked in Syria and it didn't work in Ukraine at all. And so, until I do a better job, like being better on Ukraine, like I can't shit on like, the Chapo guys, like being insular or like being, like too, like I feel like I have to do a better job on that. And I think at the end of the day, our Tankie verse, we have to do the unpleasant thing, which is talk about countries that have big hexes on them. Right? Talk about places like Belarus, talk about places like Syria, talk about places like the DPRK, things that are considered off base, right? Like off the reservation, to use the racist, imperialist, colonialist expression, right? Like you're not allowed, right? Or if you are allowed, you're only allowed in that comprador setting. So if you sit there and you're like a World Bank economist guy, and you're like, what about the food riots? Did the food riots cause the Syrian revolution? Certainly not the $2 trillion that the imperialists funneled to them. That had nothing to do with it. Like that's what you're allowed to do, or you can ridicule. So I would say it's a tough position for us to do this in a nourishing way. Obviously, we've accomplished something. I mean, there's 100 of you still here, 100 exactly, after 3 hours. This is insane. Jared, we went for 3 hours. This should be criminal, what we've done. They should ban us. StreamYard, what are you doing letting us use your platform for 3 hours?
They may.
This is a lot of fun. I don't do this. Honestly, I don't do this in my show. I should do this more. I realize now that my own community of all their other podcast producers has been a huge resource for me, but behind the scenes mostly. And I realize I should bring them more to the scene. And I'm beginning to see why podcasts do more of the friend porn genre, which is what Tankie group therapy is, because it does feel good. Let me tell you, like, it feels good to do this. Like, this is genuinely fun. I'm exhausted after all these, but I know this is also true for Red Media. Like, our shows for Red Media, when we do Red Power Hour, which is this style of back and forth, I can see how the hosts are just like dead afterwards. And so, yeah, like, I think we should do this more, and we should make this a regular thing. And I feel like it is good for me to kind of get out of the mode of the talking head. I mean, this is still the talking head, but it is a bit livelier because it's not as structured. Not that my talking head interviews are structured in any way, but you know what I mean.
I do, you know, and I mean, it's different for me too, because I mean, people probably see me a lot of times, and a lot of times I'm just quiet. And I mean, I've been quiet a lot today too, you know, but a lot of times I'm just sitting there and I have my questions prepared and I'm just asking the question. And sometimes people critique me for that, but it's also like that's my preparation and the way that I approach a lot of the conversations. But it is nice to
So they're
just have
mad that you don't interrupt your guests every 5 seconds
yeah.
and put them on and do like a 15-minute tangent out of nowhere. Wait, they're mad at that? Gee, I wonder what show
Some
you could
people,
go to for that.
yeah. Right. If you like that, go to Sina's show. Yes, absolutely. All right. I'm going to run through these last questions and then we're going to get out of here. We're not questions, comments. We're just going to read these off and then we're going to sign off because it has been 3 hours. So, Sina, this has been great. It's been a lot of fun. Let's do it again. Maybe we could do it next week and have a little bit of a Iran discussion because I think
Yeah,
would
should.
be good. All right, so we need a strategic focus on children as an audience. I don't disagree. All I will say is I am not the person to do that. My kids don't even like me, so I don't think that anyone else's kids are going to be
I don't even have
interested
no
in,
kids.
you know,
My kid is a dog.
yeah, no, my kids are like, Dad, why do you have to ever make everything? Why do you have to like? I'm the Debbie Downer of the family, you know. So it's like, Dad, why did you kill Captain America? All right.
Why can't we have nice things?
What is needed to bring the backward masses forward is the decolonial vanguard party that drags them. George Jackson, Blood in My Eye, has a good version of what needs to be done. I always recommend people to read Blood in My Eye. It's a great book. And yeah, I would love to see the emergence of this great decolonial vanguard party. We're all waiting. But yeah, if anybody has that, go for it. I think the East is a podcast offered a better education than
I'm screenshotting
pretty
this.
much all of my university experience. Thank you, Sina.
Wait, Control Shift 3, don't screenshot. Oh, I got it. Yay. Okay.
All right, good. I left academia 3 times. I will never regret it. Saved my soul in the long haul here in the colony. Content like this is how I educate my son, honestly. So maybe we do work for children. I don't know. You know, your children are special if they can put up with us. That's what I'll say. Shout out to your kids. I think this is a good comment. You know, this is part of what I've thought about. I don't know the degree to which this was. I don't want to give too much credit in them being this smart, but I think this was the effect, right? So I think that the war in Ukraine has forced Russia and some of its allies to put a lot of their resources into that war. And I think it would have been interesting, you know, it's just an intellectual exercise. We can't know, but to know how things would have been different October 7th and subsequently, and with Syria and everything else, if so much of like Russia and its allies kind of resources weren't directed towards the war in Ukraine. And again, we can't know, but it certainly in the end was convenient for the United States and the Zionists in terms of their aims in the region, I think. You should do this more, Sina. Somebody else said you should do this once a week.
I'll do it. I'll do live episodes. I was starting to thinking of doing like live rant episodes. I could do that. I can rant. I rant anyways with other people on. I might as well do it. I might as well rant alone. I'll do it. Okay. All right, I'll do it.
I've done a few, self episodes. It's weird to do one all by yourself, I will say. And oh my God, has it been 3 hours? It has been 3 hours. We are gonna give you back the rest of your day, but it's been Sina, it's been great. And let's do it
Thank you,
again.
Jay.
We'll get on
Thank you,
the
chat.
phone
Thank you, chat.
and figure out our next one. And yeah, the people also want us to do documentaries too. That's the other thing that I took away from you know, took away from this conversation.
We'll do
So
it.
anyways,
We'll do it.
thanks again, Sina.
Thank you.
Check the chat, support the Patreons. I have Sina's in there too. Support, buy me a coffee. You know, we need to diversify our portfolio, as Riza and Jizza would say. All right, peace, everybody.